Chapter 322. By Jianmu sneered. Prince Zhang, do you think you've won just like that? You're wrong. Our battle has just begun. You better be careful next time. Don't fall into my hands. After hearing Bai Jianmu's words, Zhang Meng didn't care. He decided, Bai Jianmu, trust me. From now on, I'll count to 10. If you don't say your last words, then I'm sorry. I'll take it that you have nothing to say and you'll disappear from this world forever. Ha! After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Bai Jianmu laughed out loud. It was as if he had heard the most unbelievable thing in the world. Zhang Meng wasn't moved. He opened his mouth and started counting. 1, 2, 3, ah! Bai Jianmu was still laughing. He didn't believe that when Prince Zhang counted to 10, he would have a way to save Sun Xinjing. Bai Jianmu was very confident in himself. So what if Prince Zhang's martial arts skills were high? Could he save Sun Xinjing from his fingers? Impossible. His hand was placed on Sun Xinjing's throat. If he wanted to, Sun Xinjing would be dead in a breath's time. As for young Master Zhang, he wanted to rescue Sun Xinjing within a breath's time. This was a little too unbelievable. The more Bai Jianmu thought about it, the more he wanted to laugh. He couldn't help but laugh out loud again. Ha! 7, 8, 9. When Zhang Meng counted to 9, he suddenly sighed. Why is my heart so soft? Although I know that you're an evil person, I can't bear to do it. Bai Jianmu, I'll give you one more chance. Tell me your regrets, and I'll help you complete them. After saying this, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. Bai Jianmu, say your last words. This can be considered your final care for your family. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Bai Jianmu's gaze suddenly turned cold as he shouted, All right, then let me tell you. If I become the branch master of the South County branch, my family will become the 5th elder of the Bai family in the South County. Can you do it? Can you make them the 5th elder of the Bai family in the South County? Upon hearing this, Zhang Meng's expression turned grave. Bai Jianmu, are these your last words? Bai Jianmu laughed out loud. So what if I am? Do you think you can do it? Haha. Looking at Bai Jianmu, who was laughing loudly, Zhang Meng sighed and said loudly, Bai Jianmu, are your last words to let your family become the 5th elder of the South County branch? Bai Jianmu sneered. Do you think you can do it? Zhang Meng said solemnly, Bai Jianmu, after you leave, I'll go to your house. If your family isn't as bad as you, I can fulfill your wish. At this point, Zhang Meng sighed and said with a bitter smile, Bai Jianmu, do you know that you're very lucky? You're the first person I've made disappear. In order to not make me feel bad, I'll try my best to fulfill your wish. At this point, Zhang Meng raised his hand and waved at Bai Jianmu. I hope you'll be a good person in your next life. Goodbye. Seeing Zhang Meng waving goodbye to him, Bai Jianmu's heart turned cold. Looking at Zhang Meng's regretful face, he suddenly believed Zhang Meng's words. He actually wanted to beg for mercy, but it was too late. When Zhang Meng's hand fell, Bai Jianmu had already disappeared. Sun Xinjing, who was restrained by Bai Jianmu, slowly fell to the ground without any external support. There was no other sound except for the sound of the wind blowing and the rustling of the leaves. Everyone looked at the place where Bai Jianmu disappeared in disbelief. They wanted to figure out what was going on, but they found that their minds were blank. How could Bai Jianmu disappear? LV Wen Kong, Yi Xian, and the others were shocked. However, Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong were different from them. At this moment, Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong had large beads of sweat on their foreheads. Their bodies were already soaked in cold sweat, and their faces were frighteningly pale. If one looked carefully, they could see that the two of them were trembling uncontrollably. After a while, everyone was awakened by Sun Xinjing's violent coughing. LV Wen Kong, Yi Xian, and the others rushed to their master to check on his condition. Only then did Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong react. They understood the situation they were facing now. Subconsciously, they ran away, wanting to get out of this dangerous place. Tang Jianan, Lu Huarong, if you don't want to disappear, hurry up and get back here. The two of them didn't take more than 2 steps before they heard Prince Zhang's voice. When they heard this voice, Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong subconsciously stopped in their tracks. They didn't even dare to move. They really didn't dare to move. Bai Jianmu was a living example. Bai Jianmu's martial arts skills were much higher than theirs. However, he disappeared just like that, let alone the two of them. After calling out to Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong, Zhang Ming slowly walked in front of Sun Xinjing. At this moment, the uncomfortable feeling in Sun Xinjing's throat had long disappeared. All that was left in his heart was shock. Prince Zhang was very powerful. Sun Xinjing had already guessed it through the divination technique just now. However, he didn't expect him to be so powerful. Sun Xinjing was very clear about Bai Jianmu's martial arts skills. He could be said to be the #1 person in the South County branch. But so what? Prince Zhang didn't make a move, and Bai Jianmu disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Seeing Prince Zhang walking over, Sun Xinjing calmed down and waved to the disciples in front of him. All of you, leave first. I have something to talk to Prince Zhang alone. After hearing Sun Xinjing's words, LV1 Kong, Yi Xian, and the others quickly cupped their hands and retreated to the side. Zhang Ming squatted down in front of Sun Xinjing and asked with a smile, "Old Sun, how are you feeling? Are you okay?" Hearing Zhang Ming's question, Sun Xinjing nodded. "I'm fine." At this point, Sun Xinjing subconsciously looked around and asked in a low voice, "Prince Zhang, where did Bai Jianmu go?" When Zhang Ming heard this, he spread out his hands. "No, he disappeared?" Sun Xinjing's eyes widened. "Did he really disappear?" Zhang Ming nodded. His expression suddenly became a little ugly. He said with a crying smile, "To be precise, Bai Jianmu has turned into ashes and disappeared into the air." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, although it was within Sun Xinjing's expectations, he couldn't help but gasp. He had never heard of a martial arts skill that could turn a person into ashes. This was really turning a person into ashes, not seriously injuring or crippling them, but really turning them into ashes and disappearing into thin air. Looking at Sun Xinjing's ugly expression, Zhang Ming sighed. "Old Sun, believe it or not, this is the first time I've turned someone into ashes. I don't feel good." Chapter 323. After listening to Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xinjing nodded silently, and then said, "Prince Zhang, Bai Jianmu's sin is useful. You have done a good deed, so don't blame yourself too much." Zhang Ming nodded and suddenly said with a smile, "Old man's son, now that the matter has been resolved and the blueprint has been found, you should fulfill the conditions you promised me." Sun Xinjing heard this and quickly nodded. "Of course, this old man will naturally fulfill all the things I promised you." Sun Xinjing naturally did not dare to neglect people like Zhang Ming. This was a fierce person who could make people disappear. If he was unhappy, it would not be difficult for him to make his old bones disappear. Thinking of himself disappearing into the air, Sun Xinjing could not help but shiver. Zhang Ming stretched out 2 fingers and said with a smile, "First, lend me 4 Tijingangs. This is not fake, right?" Sun Xinjing quickly nodded. Seeing Sun Xinjing nod, Zhang Ming continued, "Second, I want to take Zhang Leji away and let him build the auction house for me forever. You won't object to this, right?" Hearing Zhang Ming's second condition, Sun Xinjing hesitated for a moment. At first, when Zhang Ming said that he wanted to take Zhang Leji away, Sun Xinjing was furious. At that time, he had already determined that Yi Xian and Zhang Leji were the ones who stole the blueprint. They were already traitors in Sun Xinjing's eyes, so there was nothing to feel sorry about. But now it was different. Yi Xian and Zhang Leji were not the ones who stole the blueprint. Now that Zhang Ming wanted to take Zhang Leji away, Sun Xinjing was a little reluctant. "Prince Zhang, can you change the condition?" Zhang Ming shook his head and turned to look at Sun Xinjing. He smiled and asked, "Old man's son, are you going back on your word?" Seeing Zhang Ming looking over, Sun Xinjing suddenly thought of Bai Jianmu, who had disappeared. He wanted to refuse, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Zhang Ming patted Sun Xinjing's shoulder and said earnestly, "As a person, you have to be trustworthy. I found a blueprint for you, and I even got rid of the person who stole it. To be honest, this isn't much for you to thank me. Old man's son, don't you agree?" After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xinjing gritted his teeth and nodded. "All right, I agree." Hearing Sun Xinjing's answer, Zhang Ming nodded in satisfaction. That's more like it. If you don't keep your word, then what's the point of being a person? Sun Xinjing asked doubtfully. Prince Zhang, do you really want to build the auction house you mentioned? Zhang Ming smiled. Do you think I'm lying to you? Sun Xinjing nodded with difficulty. Zhang Ming laughed and patted Sun Xinjing's shoulder. Don't worry, I will build the largest auction house in the world in the future. My plan will definitely succeed. Since the matter had been resolved, Zhang Ming did not want to waste any more time here. He took Sun Xinjing to see the four Tai Jin gangs, Zhang Leji and Zhang Qiuming, and left the South County branch and walked down the mountain. When the group arrived at the foot of the mountain, Zhang Ming suddenly turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and said, Prince Zhang, do you know the Bai family in South County? After hearing Zhang Ming's question, Zhang Qiuming was stunned. He immediately reacted and asked in surprise, Are you really going to complete Bai Jianmu's last wish? Zhang Ming sighed. I don't know either. Forget it. Let's talk about it in the future. Let's go to Kikyaman to take a look first. It'll save us the trouble of taking a detour. Zhang Qiuming nodded. Brother Ming, actually, you don't have to pay attention to what Bai Jianmu and the others said. His character is so bad, so his family definitely isn't any better. Don't pay attention to him. Zhang Ming nodded silently and said in a deep voice, All right, let's go to Kikyaman first and ask them to make the nightmare cloak for us. Kikyaman was indeed a small sect. Standing in front of Kikyaman's door, Zhang Ming felt a little emotional. Kikyaman was located in the suburbs of South County. Kikyaman's entire territory was a slightly larger courtyard. If it were not for the words Kikyaman hanging on the door, Zhang Ming would never have thought that this was actually a sect. For big men stood in front of the door, carefully examining the people who came in and out. Zhang Qiuming nodded to Zhang Ming and quickly stepped forward. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, We're here to see Sect Leader Sunday. Please help me pass on the message. One of the men heard Zhang Qiuming's words and waved his hand. Young master, something big has happened in our sect. The sect leader has said that he won't see outsiders. Zhang Qiuming heard this and pointed at a man who had just walked out. He asked, What's the matter with him? The big man explained this person customized his equipment a long time ago. He's here to collect it now. Zhang Qiuming heard this and hurriedly cupped his hands again. Brother, can you make an exception? We do have something important to discuss with the sect leader. The big man heard this and frowned. What's the matter? This time, before Zhang Qiuming could speak, Zhang Ming had already stepped forward and said with a smile, We're here to help you fight against the Tiangongmen. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, the big man's eyes lit up. He said happily, Really? Zhang Ming nodded. Really? The big man heard this and was instantly overjoyed. He quickly cupped his hands and said, Then please wait for a moment. I'll go and pass on the message. As he spoke, the big man was about to walk into the sect when he was stopped by another middle-aged man. The middle-aged man turned to look at Zhang Ming and asked with a smile, Brother, do you know how to make equipment? Zhang Ming shook his head and said frankly, I don't. When the middle-aged man heard this, he frowned. Then may I ask, since you don't know how to make equipment, how can you help us? After hearing the middle-aged man's words, Zhang Ming was stunned. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. When the middle-aged man saw this, he understood and hurriedly said apologetically, Brother, it's not that I don't want to help you pass on the message, but the sect leader is currently preparing for the competition. Please don't disturb the sect leader. If this person spoke rudely to Zhang Ming could use this opportunity to slap him and barge in. However, since the man was so polite, Zhang Ming couldn't force his way in. He could only smile and say, Brother, although I don't know how to make equipment, how do you know that I can't help your sect leader? After hearing Zhang Ming's question, the middle-aged man's face turned serious. Brother, now that the competition between us and the Tiangongmen is imminent, we really don't want to distract the sect leader and cause him to lose this competition. At this point, the middle-aged man suddenly sighed. Little brother, this competition is very important. It concerns the life and death of our sect. Therefore, I hope that little brother won't take offense. Don't cause trouble for the sect leader. Chapter 3:24. Just as they were talking, a middle-aged woman walked out of the door. When she saw Zhang Meng and the others, she couldn't help but frown. Little brother, if you want to make equipment, come back in a few days. Our sect doesn't have time to make equipment for others. Before coming to Qi Qiao's sect, Zhang Meng had Zhang Laji and the other four Tai. Jing gong 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 gong. In gong and 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 gongs at this moment. Only Zhang Qiuming and the four Zhang family servants had come with him. When Zhang Meng heard the middle-aged woman's words, he quickly said, "We came here to ask you to make equipment for us. On the other hand, we want to see if there's anything we can help you with." When the middle-aged woman heard this, she narrowed her eyes and sneered. "Little brother, thank you for your kindness. However, we will deal with our sex matters. Please leave as soon as possible." After saying this, the middle-aged woman turned to the four men and said loudly, "Master doesn't have time to meet outsiders. You guys watch carefully. No one is allowed to enter. Do you understand?" When they heard the middle-aged woman's words, the four men hurriedly responded. The middle-aged woman turned to look at Zhang Meng. "Little brother, please leave." After saying this, the middle-aged woman hurriedly left. Looking at the middle-aged woman's back, Zhang Meng was puzzled. When he said that he was here to help them, the men guarding the door didn't believe him, but they were somewhat moved and grateful. However, the middle-aged woman's attitude was completely different from the four men's. From a middle-aged woman's tone, it was clear that regardless of whether Zhang Meng could help them or not, she wouldn't let Zhang Meng help them. Looking at the middle-aged woman walking away, Zhang Meng was stunned for a moment. He then turned to the man who had spoken to him and asked with a smile, "Brother, may I know who the person who spoke just now is?" The man looked left and right, and seeing that there was no one else around, he said in a low voice, "This is our sect master's eldest disciple, Shenggyun." Eldest disciple, Shenggyun. Zhang Meng silently repeated this name in his heart, but he was even more puzzled. Since they were Kikyamin's eldest disciples, why would they not want outsiders to help them? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng looked at the man and asked again, "Brother, are you going to compete with the Tiangongmen in the arena?" Many people knew about this, so there was no need to hide it. The man nodded calmly. "That's right. The competition will be held on the 8th day of the next month." Zhang Meng asked doubtfully, "Brother, I heard that the Tiangongmen are very strong. Are you confident in winning this competition?" The man was stunned when he heard this, and then he waved his hand. "I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know anything." After hearing the man's reply, Zhang Meng understood what was going on. If Kikyamin was confident in winning this competition, the man would have proudly told Zhang Meng and let Zhang Meng know how strong Kikyamin was. However, the man did not say that. This meant that Kikyamin was not confident in defeating the Tiangongmen. Zhang Meng could understand Shenggyun's attitude if she was confident in defeating the Tiangongmen. That was her arrogance and confidence. However, Kikyamin was not confident in defeating the Tiangongmen. So why did she still have such an attitude? Zhang Meng really couldn't see through this. After thinking for a while, Zhang Meng could only think of Shen Guyun's attitude as her looking down on him. Seeing that the gatekeeper did not let them in, Zhang Qiuming came to Zhang Meng's side and whispered, "The fierce brothers, since they don't let us in, what should we do? Why don't we find a hotel in Nanjun and stay there first? We'll come back to find them after their matter is settled." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Meng waved his hand. "Wait a moment." As he spoke, Zhang Meng turned his head to look at the gatekeeper and asked with a smile, "By the way, brother, I only know that Kikyamin and the Tiangongmen are competing, but I really don't know how they're going to compete. Can you tell me more about it?" The gatekeeper thought about it and felt that it was not a big deal, so he nodded and said slowly, "The competition is very simple. The method of the competition is very simple. Since it's equipment, of course, it's a competition of defensive power. Whoever makes equipment with higher defensive power wins." After hearing this person's introduction, Zhang Meng was stunned and asked with some doubt, I heard that Kikyaman only makes some cotton and leather armor, while the Tiangongmen make most of their equipment with metal. If they compete in this way, wouldn't the Tianji sect be at a disadvantage? They probably don't have much chance of winning. Although Zhang Meng did not know how to make equipment, he was very clear that in terms of defense, the defense of leather armor was not on the same level as the defense of metal armor. In other words, the two could not be compared. The purpose of leather armor was defense, and the other reason was that it was light. It could be worn by people who wanted to increase their agility so that it would not affect their movement speed. On the other hand, the main purpose of metal armor was defense. The higher the defense, the better the equipment. Logically speaking, there was no way these two types of equipment could be compared. The advantage of leather armor was that it was light. The advantage of metal armor was that it had high defense. If these two types of equipment were only competing in defense, then the result of this competition was obvious. Zhang Meng asked hesitantly, "Isn't it a little unfair to compete in defense between these two types of equipment?" The person waved his hand. Of course, it's not that simple. On the premise of competing in defense, we also have to compete in weight. The two pieces of equipment have to be the same weight, and then we'll compete in defense. At this point, the person scratched his head and continued. If I remember correctly, as long as the weight of the two pieces of equipment does not exceed 15 kilograms, they can participate in the competition. 15 kilograms? Zhang Meng calculated in his mind. If he were to compare an armor made of 15 kilograms of iron with a piece of leather armor, which would be stronger? However, Zhang Meng quickly realized that no matter how he compared the two, an armor made of 15 kilograms of iron, even if it was just a thin layer, would definitely have a stronger defense than a piece of leather armor. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng raised his head and looked at the man. He asked curiously, "If we were to compete like this, wouldn't you lose without a doubt?" As soon as Zhang Meng finished speaking, before the man in front of him could answer, a woman's voice came from the door. Who was the one who said that leather armor must lose to equipment made of metal? Chapter 325. Hearing this voice, Zhang Ming hurriedly looked up and saw an 18 or 19-year-old girl dressed in light yellow standing at the door, looking at him with a cold smile. Before Zhang Ming could reply, the gatekeepers had already stepped forward to greet her. "Greetings, Mississippi," the yellow-robed girl said to them with some displeasure. "Why aren't you guarding this place properly? Why are you talking nonsense with an outsider?" It's one of our men who hurriedly said, "Miss, this young master wants to come here to make equipment. After hearing about what happened to our sect, he asked for help." This subordinate explained to him a little. Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl turned to look at Zhang Ming. After sizing him up, she asked, "You know how to make equipment?" Hearing the yellow-robed girl's question, Zhang Ming shook his head. "No." The yellow-robed girl asked curiously, "Since you don't know how to make equipment, how can you help us?" Zhang Ming smiled. "There are many ways to help. For example, spiritual support is also a kind of help." Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl was stunned for a moment. She asked with some astonishment, "Could it be that you want to support us spiritually?" Zhang Ming shook his head. "Of course, I can't just support you spiritually. If you agree to one of my conditions, I may support you in other ways." Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl asked doubtfully, "How can you support us in other ways?" Zhang Ming said, "I haven't thought of it yet." The yellow-robed girl waved her hand. "All right then, we'll talk about it when you think of it." Saying this, the yellow-robed girl turned to look at the gatekeepers. "I'm going to the city. You guys look after this place." After saying this, the yellow-robed girl waved her hand at the two men behind her. "Let's go." After saying this, the yellow-robed girl turned to leave. Seeing that they were not letting him in, Zhang Ming hurriedly stopped the yellow-robed girl and said with a smile, "Mississippi, since Miss wants to go to the city, and we can't get in anyway, why don't we accompany Miss and go to the city together? Is that okay?" The yellow-robed girl pondered for a moment. Then, she shook her head. "This place isn't far from the city. You can go straight along this road. It won't take long for you to reach the city." Zhang Ming smiled and said, "Actually, I wanted to find someone in Kikyaman to make the black feather cloak for me. Unfortunately, something like this happened here. That's why I want to accompany you. I also want to know the details of this matter and see if there's anything I can help with. That way, you can quickly send people to make the black feather cloak for me. Black feather cape? Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl's eyes lit up. Do you have a nightmare eagle's feather? Zhang Ming nodded. Yes, there are many more. That's why I want to ask you to send someone to help me make the black feather cloak. When a yellow-robed girl heard this, she sized him up again. Do you really have a nightmare eagle's feather? Zhang Ming nodded again. Only then did the yellow-robed girl wave her hand. All right, let's go now. The group of people left the Kikyaman's gate and walked along the main road in front of the gate towards the South County City. This place was not far from the South County City. Standing in front of the Kikyaman's gate, they could actually see the tall city walls of the South County City. Therefore, they did not need to ride horses or take a carriage to go to the South County City. It was much more convenient to walk. Before they could walk far, Zhang Ming quickly walked forward and walked side by side with the yellow-robed girl. Miss, are you confident in the competition with the Tiangongman? The yellow-robed girl shook her head. It's hard to say. If we can find the diamond monster's skin, we still have a glimmer of hope. However, we've been searching for so long, but we still haven't found the diamond monster's skin. Zhang Ming asked, why do we have to find the diamond monster's skin in order to have a chance of winning? The yellow-robed girl pondered for a moment before slowly saying, diamond monsters live on a stone mountain 300 miles to the south. Because they have been drilling into the stone for many years, their defense is quite astonishing. Ordinary swords and sabers can't do anything to them. If we use their skin to make equipment, their defense will definitely be very strong. At this point, the yellow-robed girl suddenly sighed. But I go to the city every day, but I don't find any diamond monster's skin. After hearing the yellow-robed girl's words, Zhang Ming nodded. When forging leather armor, the main defensive power was dependent on the material itself. If the material used to forge leather armor was not good, no matter how capable you were, you would not be able to increase the defensive power of this leather armor. Thinking of this, Zhang Ming asked with some doubt, don't tell me that other than finding the diamond monster's skin, you don't have any other way? The yellow-robed girl shook her head. Now that we've found the skin of a wasteland bear, my mother is considering if there's any other way to increase the defensive power of this leather armor. While the two of them were talking, they had already walked into South County City. The inside of the city was completely different from the outside. As soon as they entered the city, the number of pedestrians on the road suddenly increased by several times, and all kinds of noisy voices rang in Zhang Ming's ears. Not long after they walked on the street, the yellow-robed girl led them into a small alley. At the end of the alley, there was an equipment store. The yellow-robed girl went straight to the equipment store. As soon as they walked into the store, Zhang Ming saw the yellow-robed girl hurrying to the counter. After asking at the counter, she walked back with a face full of disappointment. Zhang Ming hurriedly went forward and asked, "You don't have it?" The yellow-robed girl shook her head. "No." Just like that, the yellow-robed girl led everyone to a few more equipment stores, but they still found nothing. Looking at the yellow-robed girl with a frown, Zhang Ming could not help but ask, "Hey, why haven't we found the skin of a diamond monster after walking for so long?" This time, without waiting for the yellow-robed girl to answer, Zhang Qiuming, who had been silent at the back, quickly walked to Zhang Ming's side and said in a low voice, "Brother Ming, you might not know this, but other than their skin, the diamond monsters do not have any other uses. Furthermore, the diamond monsters stay in the rock every day and refuse to come out. Even if we want to find them, it would not be easy, much less capture them. If you hunt a diamond monster, its skin can be sold for about 1,000 gold coins. However, diamond monsters only appear on the Stone Mountain. Even if you go to the Stone Mountain, you might not even see the shadow of a diamond monster for a month. However, if you use this month to hunt wild bears, you will definitely earn more money than this. Therefore, slowly, not many people are willing to hunt diamond monsters." At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused for a moment before continuing. In addition, there's another biggest problem. The defense of diamond monsters is quite amazing. whether it's a knife or a palm strike. It won't cause much damage to it. As long as you don't kill it in one blow, it will drill into the rock. Chapter 326. Zhang Xiaoming continued. If you can't kill or capture a diamond monster when you see it, the diamond monster will immediately burrow into a rock. When that happens, you won't be able to find it again. Not only that, but the diamond monster's attack power is also very strong. It has a sharp horn on its forehead that is extremely hard. If you're hit by this horn, no matter how strong your equipment is, it will be smashed to pieces. This has a lot to do with why very few people hunt diamond monsters. If the equipment that everyone worked so hard to obtain is easily damaged by a diamond, wouldn't the gains not make up for the losses? As soon as Zhang Xiaoming finished speaking, the yellow shirt girl beside him sighed softly. The main reason is that there are too few diamond monsters. You just said that you might not be able to see its shadow for a month, and that's still an understatement. It's also possible that you won't be able to find its shadow for a year. These are all possibilities. After hearing the two's words, Zhang Meng nodded. He also understood why they couldn't find the diamond monster's skin. Diamond monsters were very rare, and it was usually very difficult to see them. Diamond monster's defense was very strong. Even if you managed to see its shadow with great difficulty, you wouldn't be able to hurt it. However, as long as you couldn't hurt it, it would burrow into a rock in a very short period of time. When that happened, it would be almost impossible to see it again. The diamond monster's attack power was also very shocking. Although the sharp horn on its forehead wasn't invincible, its damage was quite high. As long as ordinary armor encountered the sharp horn on its forehead, it was very likely that it would be reduced to scrap. After understanding this, Zhang Meng also sighed. Needless to say, even he probably didn't want to hunt diamond monsters after hearing that they were so difficult to deal with. It was too much of a waste. Since diamond monsters were so difficult to hunt, Zhang Meng felt that there wasn't much hope to continue searching. Seeing that it was almost noon, he turned to look at the yellow shirt girl and said with a smile, "We can't rush this matter. This matter can't be rushed. We've also walked a long way. Why don't we find a place to have a meal first, take a rest, and think of a way while we're at it?" The yellow-robed girl heard this and nodded. She turned her head and saw a restaurant not far away. She stretched out her hand and pointed. "Let's eat there." Since it was called a restaurant, it naturally wouldn't be on the first floor. In order to be quieter, the group of people ordered their food and went directly to the second floor. They found a table by the window and sat down at two tables. The yellow-robed girl's two subordinates and Zhang Xiaoming's four subordinates sat at the same table. Zhang Meng, the yellow-robed girl, and Zhang Xiaoming sat at the same table. Just as the three of them sat down and Zhang Meng was about to speak, they heard a burst of unbridled laughter coming from the stairs. "Where is she? I clearly saw that girl go into this restaurant. How did she disappear?" Along with the laughter, a group of people walked up the stairs. At the front was a young man in his 20s, wearing a blue robe. After this person came up, from the stairs behind them, 7 or 8 burly Han people came up one after another. The blue-robed man went up to the second floor and swept his gaze across the hall. His gaze then fell on the yellow-robed girl. Soon after, he quickly walked up to the table where the three of them were seated. Without asking anything, he directly sat beside the yellow-robed girl. "Lung family's little sister, big brother saw you on the street just now. I was just about to greet you when you went into the restaurant. It took me a long time to find you." The yellow-robed girl frowned and said in a low voice, "Han Yu Chao, do you need something?" Hearing this, Han Yu Chao laughed even more. "Little sister, don't tell me I don't need something from you." The yellow-robed girl said angrily, "Who's your little sister? Get out of here." In the face of the yellow-robed girl's angry rebuke, Han Yu Chao did not care. After laughing a few times, he slowly said, "Little sister, why do you say that? We'll be a family soon. You're treating me like an outsider." After hearing Han Yu Chao's words, the yellow-robed girl suddenly slammed the table and said angrily, "Han Yu Chao, you better make yourself clear. What do you mean we'll be a family soon? Do I know you? Are we close? I'm telling you, get out of here quickly. Otherwise, Don't blame me for being rude. Seeing this, Han Yuchao touched his chin and said indifferently, why not a family? In a few days, our two sects will compete. Your Kikiaman sect will belong to our Taingongman. At that time, won't we be a family? After hearing Han Yuchao's words, the yellow-robed girl became angry. She suddenly stood up, picked up the teacup on the table, and threw it at Han Yuchao. The yellow-robed girl and Han Yuchao were not far away. The teacup she threw was also very fast. Just as the teacup was about to hit Han Yuchao's face, a hand suddenly appeared in front of him and caught the teacup. After the hand caught the teacup, it slowly put on the table and then shrank back. Seeing that the teacup she threw was caught, the yellow-robed girl was stunned. After she reacted, she went to take the teacup in front of Zhang Ming, but she was stopped by Zhang Ming. If you have something to say it nicely. Why get angry? After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Han Yuchao suddenly laughed. The person behind him was an expert he had spent a lot of money and his father's connections to invite. If such an expert could not even catch a teacup, wouldn't it be a joke? Seeing Zhang Ming stop the yellow-robed girl, Han Yuchao knew in his heart that they were afraid. Sister Lu, this little brother is right. If you have something to say it nicely. Why get angry? Ha ha ha. After being stopped by Zhang Ming, the yellow-robed girl's anger dissipated a little. She turned to look at Han Yuchao and said coldly, Han Yuchao, we have nothing to say. Please leave here. Hearing this, Han Yuchao spread out his hands. Sister Lu, this is your fault. This is a restaurant. I can sit wherever I want. No one can stop me. Seeing that Han Yuchao was being unreasonable, the yellow-robed girl took a deep breath and turned to Zhang Ming and Zhang Xiaoming and said, let's change tables and let him eat here. This time, before Zhang Ming could answer, Han Yuchao suddenly slammed the table. No one is allowed to leave. Eat at this table. The yellow-robed girl sneered and turned to leave. Who knew that just as she turned around, a long sword blocked her way. Without young Master Han's permission, no one is allowed to leave. Zhang Ming saw the person who said this clearly. This person was the one who caught the teacup just now. This person was in his 20s. Although his appearance was not bad, his face was expressionless and looked very cold. The yellow-robed girl's two subordinates had already come behind the yellow-robed girl when the two were arguing. Now that they saw this person make a move, they did not hesitate. Chapter 3:27. When the two subordinates of the yellow-robed girl saw that someone was attacking them, they immediately swung their fists at the young man's back in an attempt to repel him. However, the young man only turned slightly and waved his hand, waving it in front of their eyes. In the next moment, the two of them were sent flying, crashing onto the table in front of them, smashing it into smithereens. Seeing that the situation had escalated and that someone had smashed the table, the innkeeper hurriedly rushed up and asked in a trembling voice, You, what are you doing? Han Yuchao waved his hand at the innkeeper and said with a sneer, Go calculate how much you should pay. I'll accompany you in a moment. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, the innkeeper turned pale with fright. Even if Han Yuchao was willing to pay for his table, so what? How much was a table worth? The key was that the customers on the second floor would all run away when they saw a fight. Even if there were people who wanted to eat, they would definitely hide far away when they saw a fight. This kind of loss would be the greatest. The innkeeper wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Han Yuchao and said, Young master, please be magnanimous. Don't fight anymore. If you continue fighting, the customers of this small store will all be driven away by you. Han Yuchao smiled and pointed at the yellow-robed girl. It's not that I want to fight. I just want to have a meal with this young lady, but this young lady doesn't want to give me face. If you can persuade this young lady to have a meal with me, then naturally this fight won't be necessary. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, the innkeeper immediately turned to look at the yellow-robed girl with a bitter face and cupped his hands. Young lady, please be magnanimous. Sit down and have a meal. If you continue to fight, then this business of mats can't be continued. Seeing the yellow-robed girl's face turn red with anger, and seeing Han Yuchao's complacent look, Zhang Ming suddenly turned to look at the yellow-robed girl and said softly, "Young lady, let's sit down and talk. Let's listen to what this young master has to say." The yellow-robed girl turned to look at Zhang Ming and then looked at the pitiful innkeeper. She coldly snorted, "Today you beat up 2 of my subordinates. Are you going to let it go just like that?" When Zhang Ming heard this, he smiled. "Of course not." Speaking of this, Zhang Ming turned to look at Han Yuchao and said with a smile, "Your men beat them up so badly. How much do you want to pay?" After listening to Zhang Ming's words, Han Yuchao laughed out loud. "Compensate? What compensation? Their skills are not as good as others. How can they blame others?" When Zhang Ming heard this, the smile on his face didn't fade. He just nodded and said with a smile, "So that's how it is. As long as your skills are not as good as others, it's useless to fight, right?" After listening to Zhang Ming's words, Han Yuchao was stunned. He subconsciously glanced at the young man and immediately nodded proudly. "Of course, I'm not as good as him. Of course, I'll fight for nothing." Han Yuchao had the right to be arrogant. This young man was a 3rd-generation disciple of the Heaven Sword sect, and his name was Shun Fei. The Heaven Sword sect was incomparably powerful, and the sect master's strength had reached the peak of the Hotian realm. In this world, there were no more than 5 people who could be his opponent. And Shun Fei was one of the best of the 3rd-generation disciples of the Heaven Sword sect. His ranking was also quite high. If it weren't for the relationship between Han Yuchao's father and the Heaven Sword sect, the Heaven Sword sect would never be willing to be a guard for someone else. With such a guard, Han Yuchao didn't believe that there were many people in the South County City who could be a match for Shun Fei. Thinking of this, Han Yuchao sneered. "Young master, what is your relationship with Kikyaman?" Zhang Ming shook his head. "It's nothing. I just came here to ask Kikyaman for help." Han Yuchao nodded. Suddenly, his eyes turned cold as he stared at Zhang Ming. He said coldly, "Young master, do you know who I am?" Zhang Ming shook his head. "I know." Han Yuchao sneered. "My name is Han Yuchao. My father is the vice sect master of the Tiangongmen. Do you know this time?" Zhang Ming nodded. "I know." Seeing that Zhang Ming knew his identity, Han Yuchao retracted his gaze and said indifferently, "Friend, if you leave now, you will be my friend. If there's anything, you can look for me." At this point, Han Yuchao paused for a moment. Then, he turned his head to look at Zhang Ming and said coldly, "If you don't leave, you will be the enemy of the Tiangongmen in the future. Do you understand?" Zhang Ming shook his head. "Young Master Han, I feel that the person who needs to leave is not me, but you." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, the yellow-robed girl, who originally had an ugly expression, suddenly laughed. "Han Yuchao, leave quickly. No one here welcomes you." Han Yuchao ignored the yellow-robed girl and stared at Zhang Ming. He asked somewhat coldly, "You really don't want to leave?" Zhang Ming shook his head. "I haven't finished my business. Why should I leave? You, on the other hand, no one at this table welcomes you. Why do you still want to stay?" At this moment, Zhang Qiuming suddenly stood up and cupped his hands toward Han Yuchao. He smiled and said, "This one is Zhang Qiuming from Signwood City. If I have offended him just now, please forgive me. For my sake, today's matter will be forgotten. In the future, this one will definitely pay him a visit to thank him." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Han Yuchao suddenly slammed the table and angrily said, "Signwood City's Zhang Qiuming, who do you think you are? You dare to meddle in this old man's business. Do you believe that I won't make it so that you won't be able to return to Signwood City?" Hearing Han Yuchao's words, Zhang Qiuming's expression couldn't help but change. Zhang Qiuming's father was the city lord of Signwood City, the boss of Signwood City. No matter how many cities there were in the South Province, the boss of a city definitely wouldn't be ordinary. Zhang Qiuming naturally knew about the Tiangongmen. This sect was extremely powerful and spread throughout the entire Anwu country. The Tiangongmen's sect master, Zhu Jinshi, was even more powerful. Not only did he rely on crafting equipment, but his martial arts were also terrifyingly high. Even if he encountered the Heavenly Sword sect's sect master, he would be able to last 100 moves without being defeated. In the Anwu country, The Heavenly Sword sect master rarely had match. Being able to last 100 moves without being defeated was already quite an honor. Moreover, Zhu Jinshi's strength wasn't just limited to martial arts. His skill in crafting equipment was even rarer. Many equipment stores and auction houses would send people to guard the Taingongmen's entrance. Their goal was to be the first to know Zhu Jinshi's situation. Once Zhu Jinshi crafted equipment, everyone would buy it at all costs. In the past few years, Zhu Jinshi had rarely crafted equipment. Now, he mainly cultivated his martial arts and wanted to improve his martial arts to the next level. It was because of this that the equipment he crafted was even rarer. As long as it was spread that he had crafted equipment, it would immediately cause a commotion. Chapter 328. The deputy leader of the Taingongmen, Han Qingyun, was Han Yuchao's younger brother. Although there was still a gap between him and Zhu Jinshi, Han Qingyun was still the second most powerful person among the Taingongmen. He had high attainments in martial arts and equipment crafting. It was also because of this that Zhang Xiaoming knew how powerful Han Yuchao's father was. That was why he wanted to minimize this matter and not offend Han Yuchao. However, this did not mean that Zhang Xiaoming was afraid of Han Yuchao. Although Zhang Xiaoming was not afraid of Han Yuchao, he really did not want to offend Han Yuchao. In Anwu country, the most popular equipment was made by the Taingongmen. As a martial artist, no one was willing to offend the Heaven Craftsman faction because a good piece of equipment was very important to a martial artist. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a life-saving asset. It was because of this that Zhang Xiaoming really did not want to offend Han Yuchao. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Zhang Xiaoming's face turned red with anger. He thought about the consequences if he lost his temper, so he gritted his teeth and endured it. Although Zhang Xiaoming endured it, his subordinates definitely could not. If they did, then what use would Zhang Xiaoming have for them? After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Zhang Xiaoming's subordinates immediately flew into a rage. The leader of the team, Wang Qi, roared angrily, "Kid, how dare you speak so arrogantly and be so rude to our young master?" As Wang Qi spoke, he gave the other three people a look. The four of them stood up at the same time and surrounded Han Yuchao. When Zhang Xiaoming saw this, he quickly waved his hands at the four people. Then, he turned to look at Han Yuchao and cupped his fists again. "Young Master Han, I think we should just let this matter go. It'll save us from hurting our relationship." After hearing Zhang Xiaoming's words, Han Yuchao glanced sideways at Zhang Xiaoming's subordinates and sneered. "Do you think that you can threaten me with these useless subordinates of yours?" Zhang Xiaoming smiled. "I wouldn't dare." Han Yuchao sneered. Suddenly, his face turned cold, and he shouted at the young man, "Shun Fei, teach them a lesson. Let them know how powerful I am, so that they won't bark like dogs." When Shun Fei heard this, he was stunned and frowned. He thought about it, and slowly walked in front of Zhang Xiaoming's four subordinates, and said in a low voice, "All of you should leave." Wang sneered. "What?" Shun Fei slowly raised his sword. With this sword, just as Wang Qi was about to say something, Zhang Xiaoming said first, "Wang Qi, you leave first." After listening to Zhang Xiaoming's instructions, Wang Qi and the others retreated to the side. However, their gazes were still fixed on this side. When Han Yuchao saw this, he sneered, "Young master, why did you ask your subordinates to leave? Are you scared?" Ha! Looking at Han Yuchao, who was laughing, the yellow-robed girl couldn't hold it in anymore. She slammed the table and said angrily, "Han Yuchao, that's enough. What do you want for you to leave?" Hearing the yellow-robed girl's words, Han Yuchao immediately stopped smiling. "Sister, don't you understand my feelings?" When the yellow-robed girl heard this, she suppressed the anger in her heart and said calmly, "Han Yuchao, I've told you many times. It's impossible between us. You should give up. Now, please leave quickly. I want to eat with my friends." When he heard the yellow-robed girl rejecting him again, Han Yuchao's face changed. The last few times, it was because his subordinates were not good enough that they had to leave helplessly. However, this time, With Shun Fei's help, Han Yuchao wanted to solve this problem once and for all. Thinking of this, Han Yuchao clasped his hands at the yellow-robed girl. Sister, why are you so stubborn? You're Kikyaman's daughter, and I'm the Taingongman's son. We're so well-matched. If the two of us get married, Taingongman and Kikyaman will be one family. When that time comes, won't it? Before Han Yuchao could finish, the yellow-robed girl interrupted him. Han Yuchao, how many times have I told you? It's impossible between us. When he heard the yellow-robed girl rejecting him again, Han Yuchao suddenly became angry. He slammed the table and shouted, Lung Yelio, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Today, I'll see what you're capable of. Speaking of this, Han Yuchao's face suddenly revealed a trace of a sinister smile. He stood up abruptly and waved his hand at the people behind him. Invite Miss Lung back first. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Lung Yelio's face turned red with anger. He said angrily, Han Yuchao, you dare? Han Yuchao sneered, see if I dare or not. Brothers, this time, before Han Yuchao could finish, one of his subordinates suddenly came in front of him and whispered a few words in his ear. After hearing this subordinate's words, Han Yuchao nodded. He turned his head and looked deeply at Lung Yelio. Then, he waved his hand at the subordinate behind him. Let's go. After saying this, Han Yuchao turned and left. In the blink of an eye, Han Yuchao and his subordinates left the restaurant, and the restaurant regained its peace. Looking at the backs of Han Yuchao and the others, Zhang Qiuming sighed softly. He knew that this matter was definitely not over. The reason why Han Yuchao left was definitely because he had other tricks up his sleeves. Seeing Zhang Qiuming sigh, Zhang Ming could not help but laugh. What's wrong, Prince Zhang? Don't you want them to leave? Zhang Qiuming shook his head and said with a serious expression, No, I'm guessing that Han Yuchao didn't really want to leave. There must be another reason. After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Lung Yelio said apologetically, I'm really sorry. Because of my matter, you guys were implicated. At this point, Lung Yelio paused for a moment before continuing. I think you guys might as well leave now and avoid trouble. When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he hurriedly asked, If we leave, what about you? Lung Yelio shook his head. It doesn't matter. Han Yuchao won't dare to do anything to me. After all, the city lord is still the most important in South County City. After hearing Lung Yelio's words, Zhang Ming smiled and waved his hand. Let's not talk about that for now. By the way, why hasn't our food been served yet? Zhang Qiuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. The fierce brothers, why are you still thinking about eating? Zhang Ming turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and asked in confusion, Are we not eating? After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Zhang Qiuming shook his head again. The fierce brothers, do you know about Taingongman? Zhang Ming nodded. I remember you told me that Taingongman make metal equipment. Is there something wrong with that? Zhang Qiuming sighed. Then do you know how powerful Taingongman are? Zhang Ming shook his head. You didn't tell me. How would I know? Chapter 329. Zhang Qiuming sighed. The fierce brothers, did you know that almost half of the equipment in Anwu country is made by the Taingongman? After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Ming was also stunned. He asked with some surprise, Really? Are the Taingongman that powerful? Seeing Zhang Ming's shocked expression, Zhang Qiuming sighed inwardly. He knew from the beginning that Zhang Ming didn't understand anything, not even the most basic of common sense. That was why he explained it to Zhang Ming in order to let him know just how powerful the Tianji sect was. Sure enough, just as Zhang Qiuming had guessed, Zhang Ming was also shocked when he heard the news. Zhang Qiuming sighed. The fierce brothers, now you understand why I don't want to clash with them. Zhang Ming nodded. I understand. After saying this, Zhang Ming turned his head to look at Lung Yelio and asked doubtfully, Since the Taingongman are so powerful and your Kikyaman dares to go against them, then your Tianxiao sect must be very powerful too, right? Lung Yelio shook his head. We don't have many people in Kikyaman and we don't have much power. After hearing Lung Yelio's words, Zhang Ming asked curiously, If you don't have much power, Then why do you still want to go against the Tiangolman? After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Lung Yelyo shook his head sadly. This isn't because we want to go against them. The Tiangolman want Kikyaman to submit to them. That's why they came up with this plan. After hearing this, Zhang Meng finally understood. I see. At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. The Tiangolman want your Kikyaman to submit to them. Isn't that a good thing? After all, your sects are too small and don't have enough resources. Just like today, you guys needed a diamond monster. If it was in Tiangolman, you wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Isn't that a good thing? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelyo shook his head. Actually, the disadvantages of belonging to the Tiangolman outweigh the advantages. First of all, they would lose their freedom. Then, no matter what they wanted to do, they would have to listen to the Tiangolman. Secondly, every sect had its own reason for existing. In other words, the reason why every sect existed was because of the inheritance of some kind of consummate skill that could support the sect. If Kikyaman submitted to the Tiangolman, Kikyaman's secret would no longer be a secret. The Tiangolman want us to submit to them mainly because they want to know Kikyaman's secret. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng nodded. It's because of his secret that you guys don't want to submit to the Tiangolman? Lung Yelyo nodded. The Tiangolman are strong because they have relied on this method from the beginning to absorb some of the smaller sects and obtain the secrets of these sections. That's how they grew bit by bit. Zhang Meng sighed. The leader of the Tiangolman is really a talent. At this point, Zhang Meng turned his head to look at Lung Yelyo and asked with a smile that was not a smile, Miss Lung, do you think the Tiangolman want to annex Kikyaman has anything to do with you? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelyo was startled for a moment before shaking his head. I don't know. Looking at Lung Yelyo's beautiful face, Zhang Meng was sure that this matter definitely had something to do with her. After all, Han Yuchao's father was the vice leader. This was very important. Zhang Qiuming sighed. The leader of the Tiangolman, Zhu Jinshi, is not only skilled in making equipment, but his martial arts are also top-notch. He definitely has a place among the top 100 experts in Anwu country. Hearing Zhang Qiuming say that the leader of the Tianji sect, Zhu Jinshi, was actually so powerful, Zhang Meng's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and asked, By the way, how's Fang Tianji's martial arts? Zhang Qiuming shook his head. I don't know. No one has seen Fang Tianji fight, but most people guess that Fang Tianji's martial arts are unfathomable. He's definitely among the top 100 experts. As for how high his martial arts are, no one knows. After hearing Zhang Qiuming's answer, Zhang Meng nodded. Ever since he went to the South County branch, he had been somewhat puzzled. The South County branch of the Tianji sect could be considered quite powerful. However, a small Bai Jianmu could actually become the #1 expert of the South County branch. Could the entire Tianji sect have a foothold in the martial arts world with such strength? If everyone had martial arts like Sun Xinjing and the others, then the South County branch would have no secrets. As long as someone had strong martial arts, they could beat the entire South County branch in a submission. What secrets would there be? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng turned to look at Lung Yelyo and asked, Then your Kikyaman sect leader should be very strong in martial arts, right? Lung Yelyo nodded slightly. He should be all right. Zhang Qiuming saw that Zhang Meng already knew how powerful the Tianji sect was. So he asked again, The fierce brothers, what should we do next? Should we wait here or go back first? Zhang Meng thought for a moment before replying. How about this? You take Zhang Liji and the 4 Tai Jingangs back first. I'll stay here and wait. When I'm done here, I'll go back to find you. Zhang Qiuming's expression changed when he heard this. He asked in a low voice, The fierce brothers, you want to... Before Zhang Qiuming could finish, Zhang Meng waved his hand and interrupted him. Prince Zhang, you guys go back first. After all, it's not a good idea to let Zhang Liji hide in the mountains. Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. Don't worry, I can take care of things here. Zhang Qiuming said anxiously, but Zhang Meng said, No buts. I'll be careful. As long as the Tiangolman don't provoke me, I won't provoke them. After hearing Zhang Meng's words and remembering that even the great earth black bear didn't dare to provoke Zhang Meng, Zhang Qiuming felt slightly relieved. If that's the case, I'll go back with Zhang Liji first. However, you have to be careful too. The Tiangongmen are too strong. If you can avoid offending them, try not to. Zhang Meng nodded. Don't worry, I won't provoke them. Hearing their conversation, Lung Yelyo hesitated for a moment before saying, I think you should go back with them. We'll have a competition on the 8th of next month. In such a short time, we won't be able to make equipment for you. Speaking up to this point, Lung Yelyo sighed again. If we can win this competition, I'll craft equipment for you. Zhang Meng smiled and waved his hand. It's okay. Even if I go back, I won't have anything to do. I'll stay here and see how things go. Maybe I can help you guys. Chapter 330. After the three of them finished eating, Zhang Qiuming left. In order to find the skin of the diamond monster, Lung Yelyo and Zhang Meng continued to stay in South County City and went to the remaining equipment shops to try their luck. Unfortunately, their luck was not good. They went to a few more equipment shops in a row, but they did not find what they were looking for. South County City was too big, and there were many equipment shops. The two of them searched until it was almost evening, but they still could not find what they were looking for. Seeing that it was already late, Lung Yelyo sighed helplessly. Let's go to another shop and go back. We'll come back tomorrow. Zhang Meng heard this and asked with a smile, Do you come here every day to look for it? Lung Yelyo nodded. In order to win this competition, we can only continue to look. At this point, Lung Yelyo sighed. Only by finding the skin of the diamond monster will we have a glimmer of hope to win this competition. Hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng suddenly asked, You mean, even if you find the skin of the diamond monster, you might not be able to win this competition, right? Lung Yelyo nodded silently. After a while, he said slowly, That's indeed the case. However, as far as we know, the skin of a diamond monster is the most likely to be obtained. Other than that, we have no other choice. As they spoke, the two of them had already arrived in front of an equipment shop. Lung Yelyo pushed open the door of the equipment shop and walked in quickly. Zhang Meng thought about the meaning of Lung Yelyo's words and walked into the equipment shop. This equipment shop was the same as other shops. In the middle of the room was a counter. This counter was very long and divided the entire room into two. The only connection was a small door on the side of the counter, which became the passage between the front and back rooms. Behind the counter, there was a row of shelves with all kinds of equipment on them. Behind the counter, there was a thin, middle-aged man sitting. At the counter behind him, there was a young man busy wiping the equipment on the shelves. When the middle-aged man saw someone enter, his eyes lit up. He quickly stood up and asked with a smile, Miss Lung, you're here. What would you like to order today? Lung Yelyo waved his hand. Qian Laoqi, I'm only asking you now. Do you have any diamond monster skin? After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Qian Laoqi shook his head. No, not for the time being. Speaking up to this point, Qian Laoqi pondered for a moment before slowly saying, Today I heard someone say that Li Jin's group seems to have hunted a diamond monster. I don't know if it's true or not. After hearing Qian Laoqi's words, Lung Yelyo's eyes lit up. He quickly asked, Really? Did Li Jin and the others really hunt a diamond-grade monster? Qian Laoqi shook his head and said, I don't know. I just heard it from one of Li Jin's people. It was just a random sentence. I don't know if it's true or not. When Lung Yelyo heard this, he lowered his head and pondered for a moment. He no longer paid attention to Qian Laoqi and turned to look at Zhang Meng. Let's go find Li Jin and see if this is true or not. As he spoke, Lung Yelyo quickly walked out of the door. Seeing Lung Yelyo leave in a hurry, Zhang Meng could only smile bitterly and chase after him. After the two of them left Qian Laoqi's shop, Lung Yelyo quickly walked towards the west of the city. Seeing this, Zhang Meng hurriedly chased after him. He walked side by side with Lung Yelyo and asked in a low voice, Who is Li Jin? Lung Yelyo replied as he walked, Li Jin lives in the west of the city. His martial arts are strong, and he usually hunts for a living. He also has 7 or 8 brothers under him. Their martial arts are not bad. They can be considered a professional hunting team. Since they had a goal, there was no need to walk anymore. The two of them left the alley and called for a carriage. They sat in the carriage and sped towards the west of the city. Looking at the shops that flew past them, Zhang Ming turned to look at Lung Yelyo and asked softly, "If you don't have the skin of the diamond monster, does that mean that you won't be able to defeat the Tiangongman?" Lung Yelyo nodded. "Actually, we mainly focus on processing and don't have our own equipment shop. Therefore, we don't have any so-called inventory. If we want to make equipment, we have to buy the materials first." Zhang Ming asked, "Are the Tiangongmen also in the South County City?" Lung Yelyo shook his head. "There are many Tiangongmen shops in the South County City, but his sect is on Qingyo Mountain, 30 miles west of the city." West of the city. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Ming nodded as if he understood something. The carriage ran for about an hour before stopping at a remote place in the west of the city. The two of them got off the carriage, paid the fare, and ordered the carriage to wait here. Only then did Lung Yelyo lead Zhang Ming to a courtyard. Lung Yelyo walked to the door and was about to knock when the door suddenly opened. Han Yuchao walked out of the door. "Sister Lu, what a coincidence. Could it be that you're here to look for your brother?" Hearing Han Yuchao's words, Lung Yelyo glared at him and asked coldly, "Is Li Jin at home?" "I'm looking for Li Jin." "Is Miss Lung looking for me?" As the voice fell, a burly man walked out of the door. "Miss Lung, why are you looking for me?" After seeing this person, Lung Yelyo hurriedly asked, "Li Jin, I heard from Qian Laoqi that you hunted a diamond monster. Can you sell its skin to me?" Hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Li Jin subconsciously glanced at Han Yuchao, then turned to look at Lung Yelyo and said apologetically, "It's true. We really hunted a diamond monster yesterday. It's just that you guys came too late. Just now, I sold this diamond monster to young Master Han." Hearing this, Lung Yelyo turned to Han Yuchao and said angrily, "Han Yuchao, what are you doing?" Han Yuchao waved his hand. "No reason. I'm just happy. It's that simple." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Lung Yelyo's anger rose. "Han Yuchao, the equipment that your sect makes are all metal equipment. You don't even need the skin of a diamond monster. Why do you want to buy a diamond monster? You're obviously going against me." Clap, clap, clap. Hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Han Yuchao clapped his hands. "You're right. I'm going against you. What can you do? If you want a diamond monster, sure. Beg me. Maybe I'll be happy and give this diamond crown to you." "Ha!" Hearing this, Lung Yelyo laughed coldly and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "Han Yuchao, you're dreaming." Han Yuchao laughed and waved to his subordinates behind him. "Brothers, carry the diamond monster and let's go." Just as Han Yuchao finished speaking, two of his subordinates carried a diamond monster out of the door. Seeing the two of them carrying the diamond monster, Lung Yelyo was so angry that his eyes were spitting fire, but there was nothing he could do. Chapter 331. Seeing that the two of them were about to leave with the diamond monster, Lung Yelyo hurriedly waved her hand to stop them. She turned to look at Han Yuchao, took a deep breath, and said slowly, "Han Yuchao, how much did you pay for it? I can give you double the price. What do you think?" Han Yuchao smiled and shook his head. "No." Lung Yelyo said, "I'll give you 3 times the price." Han Yuchao waved his hand. "Save it. Do you think I'm someone who lacks money?" At this point, Han Yuchao paused for a moment before continuing. "Let's not talk about 3 times the price. To tell you the truth, even if you give me 10 times the price, I won't sell it to you." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Lung Yelyo could no longer hold it in. She said angrily, "Han Yuchao, what exactly do you want to give the diamond monster to me?" Han Yuchao sneered. "I've already said it. If you beg me, I might be happy and give this diamond to you." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Lung Yelyo's eyes suddenly widened. She stared at Han Yuchao and said angrily, "Han Yuchao, you're too much." Han Yuchao sneered. "Since you're not begging me, I'm leaving." Seeing that Han Yuchao was about to leave, Lung Yelyo hurriedly stopped him. "Wait, Han Yuchao, change your condition." After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Han Yuchao suddenly turned his head to look at Lung Yelyo and said affectionately, "Sister Lu, ever since I saw you for the first time, I've been deeply attracted to you. From then on, I made a vow to marry no one else but you. Sister Lu, as long as you promise me, I can even give you me, let alone a diamond monster. Sister Lu, now I only need one word from you. As long as you promise me, this diamond is yours." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Lung Yelyo did not immediately say anything. She only stared at Han Yuchao and did not say anything for a long time. Seeing this, Han Yuchao hurriedly said, "Sister Lu, have you already discovered my strengths?" Hearing this, Lung Yelyo said coldly, "Merits? I just want to see how shameless you are to actually use a diamond monster to trick me." After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Han Yuchao's expression immediately changed. No matter how thick-skinned he was, anger still rose in his heart. Han Yuchao sneered, "You don't agree?" Lung Yelyo said, "In your dreams." When Han Yuchao heard this, he quietly looked at Lung Yelyo. After a long while, he suddenly waved his hand at Shun Fei behind him. "Capture him. I want to see how tough he is." Hearing this, Shun Fei was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look at Han Yuchao and said hesitantly, This is a little inappropriate." When Han Yuchao heard this, he said angrily, "What's wrong with that? We agreed that you would work for me for a year. Are you going back on your word now?" After listening to their conversation, Lung Yelyo said angrily, "Han Yuchao, how dare you? So what if you're the young master of the Tiangolman? Aren't you afraid of being punished by the prefectural governor?" When Han Yuchao heard this, he sneered, "Punishment by the prefectural governor? We got married openly, so why would he punish us?" Lung Yelyo said angrily, "Who wants to marry you?" As he said this, Lung Yelyo turned his head to Zhang Ming and said, "Ignore this lunatic. Let's go." Han Yuchao sneered, "Lung Yelyo, you still want to leave today?" Lung Yelyo turned his head to look at Han Yuchao. "You dare stop me?" When Han Yuchao saw this, he waved his hand at Shun Fei again. "Shun Fei, go and capture him." When Shun Fei heard this, he sighed and slowly drew his sword. When Lung Yelyo saw that the situation was not good, he hurriedly pulled Zhang Ming and shouted, "Run!" When Shun Fei saw Lung Yelyo run, he could not help but be stunned. However, he heard Han Yuchao shouting nonstop, "Chase after him! You trash! You must not let him escape today." Han Yuchao's lackeys immediately chased after him. However, Shun Fei was stunned on the spot. When Han Yuchao saw that his main force did not chase after him, he could not help but say angrily, "Shun Fei, have you forgotten? We have a contract. If you go against it, I'm afraid you won't be able to return to the Heavenly Sword sect." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Shun Fei was helpless and could only chase after Lung Yelyo's back. Although Shun Fei did not want to chase after Lung Yelyo, he had no choice but to do such a shameful thing. This was because when he came, his master had already instructed him to listen to the orders of the Han family. Although Shun Fei's martial arts were not bad among his peers, it was only not bad. Moreover, his master was only a marginal figure in the Heavenly Sword sect. If Shun Fei completed this mission well, then his name would naturally appear in the eyes of the main figures of the Heavenly Sword sect. However, if he did not complete it well and was even complained about by the Han family, then it would not be a good thing. The reason why the Heavenly Sword sect sent people out was also one of the conditions that they had reached with Han Qingyun. Although the Heavenly Sword sect's martial arts were superb and famous in the Jianghu, they did not conquer the world with their bare hands. They also needed equipment and weapons. The place where the best equipment and weapons could be made in the Anwu Kingdom was naturally the Tiangolman. It could be said that the best equipment in the Heavenly Sword sect was made by the Tiangolman. Han Qingyun's crafting skills could be considered first-rate, or even super first-rate, while the Tiangolman's crafting skills were definitely the best in the Anwu Kingdom. The two great sects that the Heavenly Sword sect did not want to offend the most were the Tiangolman and the Swordsmithing sect. The Tiangolman were mainly famous for crafting all kinds of equipment. The swordsmithing sect mainly crafted all kinds of weapons, especially the long swords that they crafted. They were the best in the Onwu Kingdom. Although the Heavenly Sword sect's martial arts were superb, offending these two sects would cause them to lose the supply of weapons and equipment. It would definitely be a devastating blow. It was also because of these reasons that when Shun Fei came out, his master kept reminding him to listen to the Han family's orders and not to cause a conflict between the two sections. Shun Fei was naturally not stupid. He naturally understood the logic behind this. If he messed up this matter, then he would not have to return to the Heavenly Sword sect anymore. In fact, he would even be captured by the Heavenly Sword sect to be punished. Therefore, Shun Fei was helpless. Even if he did not want to do this, he could only grit his teeth and do it. Lung Yelyo ran very quickly. After seeing Shun Fei make a move in the restaurant, she knew that they were definitely not Shun Fei's match. It was also because of this reason that Lung Yelyo decisively pulled Zhang Meng and ran away. Kikyaman was not famous for their martial arts, but for their crafting skills. Lung Yelyo's martial arts were not high. Although he felt that he was running quite fast, there was still a gap between him and Shun Fei. Lung Yelyo pulled Zhang Meng and ran in front of him with all his might. In just a short moment, he was already panting from exhaustion. However, Shun Fei stomped on the ground and became as light as a feather. In a few moments, he had already caught up to Lung Yelyo and Zhang Meng. Chapter 332. Hearing the sound of wind behind him, Lung Yelyo was so scared that his face turned pale. When he saw Han Yuchao's eyes just now, Lung Yelyo understood that Han Yuchao was serious this time. If it didn't run, then who knew what would happen? Seeing that he was still 30 to 40 meters away from the carriage, a figure flashed in front of Lung Yelyo. Shun Fei had already jumped in front of him from the air. The next moment, a cold light appeared in Shun Fei's hand, and a long sword blocked in front of Lung Yelyo. Let's stay. Seeing that Shun Fei was blocking in front, it was impossible to stay. Lung Yelyo pulled Zhang Meng and rushed into a small alley at the side. Shun Fei sneered. He didn't want to hurt the two people in front of him. He only needed to stop them. Shun Fei's figure flew into the air again. With a turn in the air, he landed in front of Lung Yelyo and Zhang Meng again. Lung Yelyo exclaimed and pulled Zhang Meng to turn and run. Shun Fei exerted force on his feet. Just as he was about to leap into the air, he suddenly realized that one of his legs had tripped over the other. He had already fallen forward diagonally. The force on his feet actually exploded at this moment. His entire body slid forward like lightning, sticking close to the ground for a distance. He only stopped when he hit Zhang Meng's foot. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lung Yelyo had already pulled Zhang Meng to the front of the carriage. Seeing the fierce chase in front of him, the coachman was already scared stiff. Only when he heard the person who had jumped onto the carriage urging him to hurry did he react. He hurriedly waved his whip, and the horse pulling the carriage slowly began to move. At this moment, Han Yuchao's subordinates had already caught up. They split up. Someone grabbed the carriage from behind, and someone went up to the front to stop the carriage. Seeing that someone in front was waving his hand to stop the carriage, the coachman was just about to pull the horse back when Lung Yelyo snatched the whip and whipped the horse fiercely. The horse pulling the carriage cried out in alarm and immediately moved its four hooves, rushing forward without a care. The two subordinates of Han Yuchao, standing in front of the carriage, only laughed coldly when they saw the carriage rushing towards them. They weren't afraid at all. The two of them were originally famous bandits and had good martial arts. Although they were not as good as Shun Fei, they were definitely not far off. At this moment, seeing the carriage rushing over, the two of them looked at each other and nodded slightly, understanding each other's thoughts. Therefore, the two of them separated, one on the left and one on the right. They grabbed the reins at the same time and stopped the carriage. The two of them exerted strength in their legs and were about to separate when they suddenly felt their legs go soft. They could no longer stand and fell in front of the carriage. Seeing the carriage getting closer and closer, it was already too late for them to dodge. Cold sweat immediately appeared on their foreheads. Helpless, they could only clench their teeth close their eyes, and wait for disaster to descend. The horse pulling the carriage was in pain from Lung Yelyo's attack. It did not care about the obstacles in front of it. When it saw someone fall in front of it, it raised its four hooves and leaped over the two people. Although the horse pulling the carriage jumped over, the wheels of the carriage could not jump over. Just like that, the carriage ran over the two of them. Following the two mournful screams, the bumpy carriage regained its stability and continued to rush forward. The two people blocking the carriage in front were run over by the carriage. The two people behind were not any better. The two of them grabbed the carriage. In fact, they also knew that it was impossible for them to pull the carriage. They could only watch from behind and not let Lung Yelyo run away. However, after they grabbed the carriage, they suddenly felt their legs go soft and were dragged by the carriage. They wanted to let go, but their hands could not. They could only be dragged forward by the carriage. As the carriage moved forward, the two of them were dragged behind. It was already impossible for them to let go. They could only let out shrill screams. After running for an unknown distance, the two of them felt their hands loosen and they stopped. However, at this moment, the two of them were already covered in bruises from being dragged by the carriage. It was a tragic sight. When Han Yuchao arrived, he thought that he would definitely be able to catch Lung Yelyo. However, he did not expect that not only did he not see his subordinates catch Lung Yelyo, but he also saw a few of his subordinates lying there moaning. Shun Fei's martial arts were strong, but when he used all his strength, the rubbing against the ground was not light. His entire clothes were already torn. As for the two people blocking the carriage, they were also crushed by the carriage. In the distance, there were two subordinates lying on the ground, unable to move, but they kept screaming. Seeing this scene, Han Yuchao immediately flew into a rage. He looked at the carriage that was running further and further away and roared loudly. "Lung Yelyo, just you wait." Seeing that they had escaped danger, Lung Yelyo's face was already red with excitement. She reached out and grabbed Zhang Meng, saying, "We finally escaped." Zhang Meng nodded. "We finally escaped." When he said this, Zhang Meng laughed in his heart. If it wasn't for his help, this little girl would definitely have fallen into Han Yuchao's hands today. Lung Yelyo's happiness only lasted for a moment before she became depressed again. Unfortunately, it wasn't easy to get a diamond monster, but Han Yuchao bought it first. Sigh. It won't be easy to find another diamond monster. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng's heart suddenly moved. He turned to look at Lung Yelyo and said with a smile, "If that's the case, why don't we go back and snatch that diamond monster back?" Hearing this, Lung Yelyo's eyes lit up, but soon they dimmed again. She shook her head and said, "No, their martial arts are too strong. We definitely can't beat them." Zhang Meng smiled and said, "Why should we fight with them? We can." As he spoke, Zhang Meng made a very secretive move. Seeing Zhang Meng's move, Lung Yelyo's eyes lit up again. "Yes. Okay, let's do that. Since Han Yuchao dares to ruin our plans, we'll go too." After saying this, Lung Yelyo also made the same gesture as Zhang Meng. After the two of them made this gesture, they both looked up to the sky and laughed. Lung Yelyo turned to look at the coachman and said with a smile, "Please turn back. We still have something to do." After what happened just now, the honest coachman was still trembling in fear. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, he immediately shook his head. No, don't go back." Seeing this, Lung Yelyo hurriedly said, "Don't be afraid. With us here, you'll be fine." The coachman wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said in a trembling voice, "You guys don't make things difficult for me. I won't go back no matter what." Seeing that the coachman wasn't willing to go back, Lung Yelyo could only say, "We'll give you more money, okay?" Hearing this, the coachman shook his head again. "I'm not going back." Chapter 333. Seeing that the coachman refused to go back, Lung Yelyo and Zhang Meng had no choice but to get off the carriage and walk in the direction they came from. Before they got close to the scene, they heard Han Yuchao's angry roar from afar. "Trash, idiots, there were so many people, but the two of them got away. Look at you. You call yourselves masters, But how can masters be crushed by a carriage? And the two of you, are you stupid? The carriage dragged you away. Don't you know how to let go? And Shun Fei, Master Shun, didn't you say you were very powerful? How did you end up like this? I think you're just too proud of yourself. Hearing Han Yuchao's angry roars and seeing the miserable state of his subordinates, Lung Yelyo almost laughed out loud. Luckily, Zhang Ming's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast enough to cover her mouth, preventing her from making a sound. Hearing Han Yuchao's angry roar and reprimand, his subordinates didn't dare to speak. They could only lower their heads and listen obediently. Even Shun Fei had his head drooped, looking listless. He had been practicing martial arts for so many years, but he didn't expect that he would trip over himself. He slid so close to the ground, but fortunately his face wasn't injured. It was a blessing in disguise. Hearing Han Yuchao's reprimand, Shun Fei blushed and wanted to find a hole to hide in. Everyone waited for Han Yuchao to finish reprimanding before asking in a low voice. That girl ran away. What should we do? Hearing this, Han Yuchao's anger, which had subsided, burst out again. You trash! That girl ran away. What are we doing here? Go home, idiots! At the end, Han Yuchao was almost roaring. Everyone was so scared that they hurriedly turned their heads and hid to the side. At this moment, the two people carrying the diamond monster walked over. Seeing the diamond monster, Han Yuchao's mood suddenly improved. He sneered, Kikyuman wants to make a decent piece of equipment, so they won't let go of this diamond monster. Zhang Laoqi, who was carrying the diamond monster, came up and said, Sir, since they want this diamond monster, let's use it to set a trap for them. Even if they know it's a trap, they'll still jump in. Don't you think so, young master? After hearing Zhang Laoqi's words, Han Yuchao was overjoyed. He reached out and patted Zhang Laoqi's shoulder. Yes, you're right. What kind of trap should we set to catch that girl? Zhang Laoqi rolled his eyes and said with a smile, Actually, it's simple. We just need to have this diamond monster in our hands and then tell Lung Yelyo that we're waiting for her in the garden in the west of the city. For this diamond monster, even if she knows that this is a trap, she still has to come. After hearing Zhang Laoqi's words, Han Yuchao pondered for a moment before laughing out loud. After laughing, Han Yuchao clenched his teeth and said, Lung Yelyo, nice to meet you. I want to see if you can escape from my hands. As he spoke, Han Yuchao stretched out his hand and clenched his fist to show his determination. Seeing this, Zhang Ming leaned over to Lung Yelyo's ear and asked in a low voice, Will you go if they set up this trap? Hearing this, Lung Yelyo was stunned for a moment before nodding sadly. Seeing Lung Yelyo like this, Zhang Ming sighed in his heart. Han Yuchao had already calculated that as long as he had this diamond monster, Lung Yelyo would definitely not be able to escape from his hands. Thinking of this, Zhang Ming turned to look at Lung Yelyo and said in a low voice, With this diamond monster, are you sure you could defeat the Tiangongman? Lung Yelyo was stunned for a moment before shaking her head. I don't know. After hearing Lung Yelyo's answer, Zhang Ming thought for a moment before saying in a low voice, Since that's the case, let's go back first. Hearing this, Lung Yelyo said anxiously, Then aren't we going to steal that diamond monster? Zhang Ming shook his head. Even if you have that diamond monster, you might not be able to defeat them. Why are you still going to steal it? Let's go back and talk about it. As he spoke, Zhang Ming pulled Lung Yelyo back. Lung Yelyo suddenly broke free from Zhang Ming's hand and said in a low voice, You don't dare? Zhang Ming shook his head. It's not that I don't dare, but it's useless to steal it. Why waste time? Lung Yelyo said unhappily. You just don't dare? Hearing this, Zhang Ming could not help but laugh. How do you think I don't dare? Lung Yelyo said, You saw that Han Yuchao and the others are powerful, so you don't dare. Zhang Ming could not be bothered to argue with Lung Yelyo. He reached out and grabbed Lung Yelyo again before walking back. All right, let me tell you. I have a way for you to win this battle. Hearing this, Lung Yelyo shook his head. You're lying to me. Even my mother can't do anything. What can you do? Zhang Ming smiled. Don't worry, I really have a way. It's just that I won't tell you yet. The two of them chatted as they walked back in the direction they came from. The Kikyaman was in the east of the city while they were in the west. If the two of them walked all the way back, it would take them a lot of time. They were lucky. They didn't walk far before they found a carriage that could carry people. After negotiating the price, they sat in the carriage and sped towards the Kikyaman. Even though they were in a carriage, it still took them nearly an hour to reach the east gate. After leaving the city, after a while, the coachman pulled the galloping horse and stopped in front of the Kikyaman. This time, with Lung Yelyo leading the way, no one stopped Zhang Ming. The two of them entered the Kikyaman and walked towards the backyard. The Kikyaman's courtyard was very big. It was divided into two parts. One part was where Lung Yelyo and her mother lived. The other part was where they made equipment. The rest of the people, including Sun Xiao's two disciples, had their own homes outside the courtyard. They didn't live in the courtyard. Lung Yelyo led Zhang Ming to the backyard. As soon as they entered the backyard, a middle-aged woman came up to them. "Miss, why are you only back now? Madam is looking for you." Lung Yelyo responded and asked for Sun Xiao's location. She then led Zhang Ming to the living room. After Sun Xiao finished her dinner, she sat there in a daze. She was thinking about the competition with the Tiangomen. Until now, although the two sides hadn't officially competed, Lung Yelyo knew that even if they didn't compete, she would be the one to lose in the end. This competition wasn't fair to begin with. Using leather armor and metal armor to compete in defense wasn't a fair competition. Everyone knew that as long as it was metal armor, it would definitely surpass leather armor in terms of defense. What was the function of leather armor? It was to reduce weight. In addition, wearing leather armor wouldn't affect one's mobility. This was the real function of leather armor. Chapter 334. Everyone knew that no one would choose leather armor as their main defensive equipment. Instead, they would choose metal armor. However, this time, they were competing with leather armor and metal armor. Just as Sun Xiao was deep in thought, the door to the living room was pushed open. Lung Yelyo and Zhang Ming walked in. "Mother, are you looking for me?" "Lil Lu, you're back. Mother wants to ask you if you found what we wanted." Hearing Sun Xiao's question, Lung Yelyo shook his head. "No." At this point, Lung Yelyo quickly walked to Sun Xiao's side and said angrily, "Originally, Li Jin and his group from the west of the city hunted a diamond monster. Unfortunately, Han Yu Chao and the others beat them to it. What a pity." Hearing this, Sun Xiao nodded and said disappointedly, "I see." As she spoke, Sun Xiao suddenly saw Zhang Ming behind Lung Yelyo. She asked curiously, "Lil Lu, who is this person?" Hearing Sun Xiao's question, Lung Yelyo quickly pointed at Zhang Ming and said with a smile, I still don't know your name." Zhang Ming smiled and cupped his fists at Sun Xiao. "I'm Zhang Ming. I originally wanted to ask someone from Kikyaman to make equipment for me. I didn't expect to encounter such a situation." After Zhang Ming finished speaking, before Sun Xiao could say anything, Lung Yelyo spoke first. "Mother, he said that he could help us. That's why we brought him here." "Oh." Hearing this, Sun Xiao's eyes lit up. She turned to look at Zhang Ming. "You know how to make equipment?" Hearing this, Zhang Ming shook his head. "No." Sun Xiao was a little disappointed when she heard this. She asked again, "Prince Zhang has good materials to make equipment?" Zhang Ming shook his head again. "No." Seeing Zhang Ming shake his head again, Sun Xiao's heart, which had been filled with anticipation, turned cold once again. Prince Zhang doesn't know how to craft equipment, nor does he have any good materials to craft equipment. So, how does Prince Zhang intend to help us? Hearing Sun Xiao's question, Zhang Ming smiled and said slowly, "Sectmaster Sun, there is something that I don't understand. Can you tell me?" Sun Xiao nodded. "What is it?" Zhang Ming asked. "The defensive power of leather armor is not as good as that of metal armor. This is something that everyone knows. But why does Sect Leader Sun still want to use leather armor to compete with metal armor? Could it be that Sect Leader Sun had absolute confidence in winning? Would you agree to this duel? I don't understand this point," So, I would like to ask Sect Master Sun to enlighten me. After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Sun Xiaoer pondered for a moment before slowly saying, "Actually, this matter will spread out sooner or later. Even if I tell you, it doesn't matter." Speaking of this, Sun Xiaoer's tone paused, and then she explained the reason for this matter. Tiangongmen, Swordcrafting Sect, Medicine King Pavilion. These three sects focused on equipment, weapons, and materials. These were the three most important sections. Tiangongmen was the sect that crafted the most equipment in the Jianghu. Swordcrafting Sect was the sect that crafted all kinds of weapons. Medicine King Pavilion was the sect that refined all kinds of pills. The three sects were powerful, but they were still not satisfied. They wanted to improve their strength. However, the development of the sect's strength had reached a bottleneck. They needed to inject new technology. The three sects turned their attention to some of the smaller sections. They wanted to absorb these sections. After obtaining the technology of these smaller sects, they could use it to develop their own sect strength. The three sects joined forces and issued challenges to the smaller sects that they wanted the most. Of course, these smaller sects could choose not to accept the challenge, but the prerequisite was that they had to join the sect. Under such circumstances, Kikyaman was powerless. Although the Tiangongmen's conditions were unreasonable, there was still a glimmer of hope. If Kikyaman did not accept the challenge, then the Tiangongmen would use extreme methods to force Kikyaman to submit. With the strength of a smaller sect like Kikyaman, it would be a matter of minutes for the Tiangongmen to defeat them or even destroy them. For the sake of Kikyaman's continued existence, and to prevent the Tiangongmen from causing trouble, Sun Xiaoer could only accept this unfair challenge to obtain a glimmer of hope. However, Sun Xiaoer also knew that this glimmer of hope was not much different from having none. It was basically impossible to use leather armor to defeat metal armor. After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Zhang Meng nodded silently. He really did not understand why Kikyaman would agree to such an unfair challenge from the Tiangongmen. Now he understood. Although this challenge was still unfair, it was still considered very fair compared to the Tiangongmen who would cause trouble in the dark or blatantly destroy Kikyaman. However, although this seemed very fair, Zhang Ming knew very well that Kikyaman had no chance of winning even if he did not understand the process of making leather armor. Zhang Ming raised his head to look at Sun Xiaoer and asked, "If you get the diamond monster's leather, do you have a chance of winning?" After hearing Zhang Ming's question, Sun Xiaoer was stunned for a moment, then sighed. "I don't know either. The Tiangongmen's craftsmanship is considered to be the best in the world. If they want to make a good piece of equipment, the defense of this equipment will definitely be shockingly high." Sun Xiaoer sighed again. "To be honest, even if we get the diamond monster's leather, we don't have much of a chance of winning against the Tiangongmen." As soon as Sun Xiaoer finished speaking, Lung Yelyo exclaimed, "Mother, didn't you say that as long as we get the diamond monster's leather, we have a chance of winning against them?" Sun Xiaoer shook her head. "There's indeed a chance of winning against them, but the chance is too slim. Moreover, we don't have all the materials we need, so we can't make the perfect equipment." Lung Yelyo quickly said, "Mother, what other materials do you need? I'll find them for you. We must beat them so that we don't have to see Han Yuchao's face." Sun Xiaoer patted Lung Yelyo lovingly and said with a bitter smile, "If it was so easy to get, I wouldn't be in such a difficult position." When Lung Yelyo heard this, she hurriedly asked, "Mother, what materials do you need? Tell me quickly. If you don't tell me, how will I know if I can find them?" When Zhang Ming heard this, he nodded. "That's right, Sect Master Sunday. As long as there's a way to defeat them, just say it. Everyone will think of a way together. We'll eventually think of a way." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xiaoer's gaze froze and she frowned. She subconsciously glanced at Lung Yelyo before turning her gaze back to Zhang Ming and asking coldly, "Prince Zhang, why are you helping us?" After hearing Sun Xiaoer's question, Zhang Ming was stunned. Chapter 335. Seeing that Zhang Ming was stunned, Sun Shower was even more suspicious. What was this person's motive for wanting to help her? Could it be? Thinking of this, Sun Shower turned to look at her daughter. Could it be? Seeing that Sun Shower was on high alert, Zhang Ming smiled bitterly and shook his head. Sect Leader Sun, I didn't mean that. My main purpose for coming here is to ask Sect Leader Sun to help me make the black feather cloak. Also, I want to maintain a long-term cooperation with you, because I think there are still many things that I need you to make. If you become Tiangongman, it will be very inconvenient for me. That's why I want to help you. Zhang Ming paused for a moment before continuing. If it's possible, you can move in with me. It will be much more convenient for you to make equipment for me. Hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Shower's eyes lit up. She quickly probed, May I know which sect Prince Zhang is from? Where do you live? In Sun Shower's opinion, if Zhang Ming was a disciple of a big sect, it would be reasonable for him to say such words. If there was no conflict between this sect and his own sect, then even if he moved over, it would only be beneficial to him and not detrimental to him. Kikyaman had too few people. Plus, they didn't have any powerful martial artists to protect them. This made their strength even weaker. If Kikyaman could let this person's sect protect them, then Kikyaman wouldn't have any worries. It wouldn't be a problem for them to grow and expand. To be honest, Sun Shower wasn't worried about technology. She was worried about safety. After so many years, the reason why Kikyaman didn't store any materials or equipment was naturally related to safety. Kikyaman's headquarters was in this courtyard. The guards in this courtyard were ordinary martial artists. It was impossible to rely on these people to protect Kikyaman. If there was a large sect to protect them, then all these problems would be solved. Thinking of this, Sun Shower nervously looked at Zhang Ming. She would wait for him to tell her the name of their sect, and then analyze the strength of this sect to see if she could help Kikyaman. Hearing Sun Shower's words and seeing her eyes, Zhang Ming naturally understood what she was thinking. Zhang Ming shook his head. I'm sorry to disappoint Sect Leader Sunday. I'm not a disciple of a big sect, but the head of a small mountain stronghold. However, please rest assured, Sect Leader Sunday, if you're willing to move over, I can absolutely guarantee that no one in this world will be able to harm you. When Zhang Ming said this, although he was full of confidence, Sun Shower didn't believe him. No matter how well the person in front of him spoke, without the backing of a large sect, everything would be in vain. The large sects had the advantage of numbers and experts. It was easy for them to protect the Kikyaman. However, relying on the protection of this young man in front of him, Sun Shower felt that it was a little unreliable. Thinking of this, Sun Shower coughed lightly and changed the topic. By the way, you haven't eaten yet, right? Go and eat first. If there's anything else, we can talk later. Hearing this, Lung Yelio immediately turned to look at Zhang Ming and said with a smile, Let's go and eat. I'm really a little hungry. After hearing Sun Shower's words, Zhang Ming understood that she didn't believe him. However, he also knew that if Sun Shower didn't know his strength, she wouldn't believe him no matter how he explained. Since she wouldn't believe him, Zhang Ming naturally didn't want to explain further. He stood up and cupped his hands at Sun Shower before following Lung Yelio to the dining room. Looking at Zhang Ming's back as he left, Sun Shower was puzzled. Until now, she still didn't understand what this young man was trying to say. His goal was to get her to go to their stronghold to make equipment for him. However, did a stronghold really need to make so many pieces of equipment? Although there weren't many people in Kikyaman, if they went all out, the production speed would be very fast. If there wasn't a corresponding supply of goods, would everyone be idle there? Wait, Sun Shower suddenly remembered something. What kind of equipment did this young man want her to make? Black feather cloak. This young man wanted her to make the black feather cloak in advance. Thinking of the black feather cloak, Sun Shower was a little uneasy. Only then did she remember that in order to make the black feather cloak, she had to use the feather of the nightmare eagle. Not only was the nightmare eagle's defense amazing, but it was also quite powerful in terms of physical and magical attacks. It was precisely because of the nightmare eagle's strength that the feather of the nightmare eagle rarely appeared. It could even be said that it didn't appear once in a few decades. Then, where did this young man get the feather of the nightmare eagle from? This young man wanted her to send someone to make the black feather cloak. This meant that it was impossible for him to only make one black feather cloak. How was this possible? At this moment, Sun Shower's eyes were filled with doubt. If this was really the case, could it be that he really had a way to hunt down the nightmare eagle? Thinking of this, Sun Shower was a little uneasy. Could it be that the mountain stronghold that this young man was talking about was actually quite a large one, the kind that had hundreds of thousands of people? If that was really the case, it was no different from a large sect. If she guessed correctly, the mountain stronghold that this young man was talking about was an extremely large one. Then, to protect a small Kikyaman would be a simple matter. At this moment, Sun Shower's tightly knitted eyebrows finally relaxed. If this matter was as she guessed, then even if she didn't compete with the Tyangalman, moving to this young man's mountain stronghold wouldn't be a problem. In the face of such a large mountain stronghold, even if the Tyangalman were strong, they would definitely give some face. Since this was the case, Sun Shower decided to wait for Zhang Meng to finish his meal before asking him in detail to see if the mountain stronghold that he was talking about was as large as she had imagined. Of course, Zhang Meng didn't know about Sun Shower's thoughts. He was thinking that this was a good opportunity. If he could bring the Kikyaman back to his mountain stronghold, it would definitely be of great help to his future development. With the help of the Kikyaman and the production of some good equipment, it would be difficult for his auction house not to become popular. Others were worried about not having good materials. No matter how skilled they were, they wouldn't be able to produce good equipment. However, Zhang Meng was different. He wasn't worried about not having good materials, but he was worried about not having good skills. As long as Zhang Meng wanted good materials, he would definitely be able to get them. However, Zhang Meng wouldn't be able to get the crafting skills. Chapter 336. After the incident with the Tianji sect, Zhang Meng realized that it was better to have it himself than to ask others for help. Now that he had Zhang Laji to help him with the mechanical engineering technique, it should not be a problem. If he could bring the people from Kikyaman back to Twin Dragon Mountain, then he would have no problem making leather armor. Next, Zhang Meng needed to contact more people from all walks of life and bring them back to Twin Dragon Mountain to make all kinds of equipment for him. Lung Yelyo, who was sitting on the other side, saw that Zhang Meng was deep in thought and could not help but ask, "Hey, what are you thinking about?" Zhang Meng smiled and shook his head. "Nothing." Lung Yelyo pouted. "Liar, I can tell that you are thinking about something. It's fine if you don't want to say it." Hearing this, Zhang Meng smiled and said, "I'm thinking. How can I help you in this competition?" Lung Yelyo's eyes lit up. "Do you have a way?" Zhang Meng hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I think so." Lung Yelyo was overjoyed when he heard Zhang Meng's words. He put down his bowl and asked, "What is it? Tell me." Zhang Meng shook his head. "I can't say it. It won't work if I say it." Lung Yelyo frowned. "Fine, don't say it. It's as if I want to know." Zhang Meng could only shake his head with a bitter smile. After the two finished their meal, they returned to the living room. Sun Shower saw that Zhang Meng had returned and quickly gestured for Zhang Meng to sit down. She then asked softly, "Prince Zhang, I forgot to ask, how many people do you have in your village?" Zhang Meng lowered his head and thought for a moment before saying slowly, "About 700 to 800 people." Sun Shower was disappointed when she heard Zhang Meng's words. A village of 700 to 800 people was nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands she had imagined. Zhang Meng knew what Sun Xiao was thinking when he saw the disappointment on her face. However, even if he knew what she was thinking, there was nothing he could do. Sun Xiao coughed softly when she saw that Zhang Meng did not speak. She covered up her rudeness and asked softly, "Prince Zhang, this competition with the Tyangalman is very important. If we lose, according to the contract, we must join the Tyangalman." Speaking up to this point, Sun Shower paused for a moment before continuing. Young Master Zhang should also know that we basically have no chance of winning this competition. I think that the chances of us losing are very high. At that time, I'm afraid that we will let young Master Zhang down." Before Zhang Ming could reply, Lung Yelyo interrupted Sun Xiaoer and said, "Mother, Prince Zhang said that he has a way to help us." Sun Xiaoer was stunned when she heard this. She turned to look at Zhang Ming and asked doubtfully, "Really? Prince Zhang really has a way to help us?" Zhang Ming nodded. "Right. If you lose the competition, you have to join the Tiangolman. However, if you win, what will happen?" Sun Xiaoer smiled bitterly when she heard Zhang Ming's words. "According to the contract, if we lose, we have to join the Tiangolman unconditionally. If the Tiangolman lose, they have to give us their precious cauldron of heaven and earth." Cauldron of heaven and earth. Zhang Ming's eyes lit up when he heard this name. With such a grand name, it must be something good. Zhang Ming asked, "What is the use of the Tiangolman's cauldron of heaven and earth?" Sun Xiaoer explained when she heard Zhang Ming's question. When refining equipment, there are many metals that cannot be smelted using normal methods. They can only be smelted using special items. The cauldron of heaven and earth is one of the treasures that can be used to refine these items. Zhang Ming was slightly disappointed when he heard this. He asked, "Can the items refined from the cauldron of heaven and earth add attributes?" Attributes? Sun Xiaoer was stunned when she heard Zhang Ming's question. She asked curiously, "What is an attribute? Is it a type of metal?" Zhang Ming knew that he had misspoken when he heard Sun Xiaoer's question. He quickly nodded and said, "Yes, an attribute is a type of metal." Sun Xiaoer nodded as if she understood. She frowned and asked, "Why have I never heard of this type of metal?" Zhang Ming wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. "It's too rare. This type of metal is too rare. That's why sect leader Sun has never heard of it." Sun Xiaoer nodded when she heard Zhang Ming's answer. She then asked, "By the way, I heard from my daughter that Prince Zhang has a way to help us. Do you have any good ideas?" Zhang Ming nodded when he heard this. He then asked, "By the way, can you tell me what you will use to refine the equipment for the competition if you can't find the diamond monster's skin?" Sun Xiaoer thought for a moment when she heard Zhang Ming's question. She then said softly, "Actually, to be honest with you, even if I have the diamond monster's skin, I don't have the confidence to win. If the Tiangolman were to refine this equipment with special materials, then no matter what material I use to refine the equipment, I won't be able to beat them." Zhang Ming nodded when he heard this. "Sect leader Sun, if that's the case, the Tiangolman will definitely use special materials to refine a piece of equipment to compete with us?" Sun Xiaoer nodded. "That's right. In order to win this competition, I believe that they will definitely do that. After all, for the sake of fairness, if they lose, they will have to give their cauldron of heaven and earth to me. They won't be willing to accept such a loss, so they have to win." Zhang Ming was puzzled when he heard this. He asked, "If they have a special skill, won't the Kikyaman have an ending to deal with them?" Sun Xiaoer smiled bitterly when she heard Zhang Ming's question. She shook her head. The two types of equipment have different functions. Naturally, they don't have the same special skill. Metal armors were all about defensive power. The higher the defensive power of the equipment, the better the equipment. Although the requirements for leather armor are the same, the higher the defense, the better. However, the material itself is also the most important factor. The defense of a leather armor mainly depends on the hardness of the material. This is the most important factor. When making leather armor, you can only add more defense to the key parts of the armor. This way, you can protect the vital parts and reduce the weight of the leather armor. This kind of leather armor is mainly suitable for people who specialize in agility or women. Sun Xiaoer paused for a moment before she continued. "Among the materials that I know of, there is basically no monster skin that can beat metal. Even if there is, we won't be able to obtain it. Therefore, we basically have no chance of winning this competition. Regardless of whether we have a diamond monster skin or not, we have no chance of winning." After listening to Sun Xiaoer's explanation, Zhang Ming nodded. He pondered for a moment before he slowly said, "It's okay, as long as you listen to me." Chapter 337. Zhang Meng continued, Sect Master Sun, as long as you listen to me, I guarantee that you can win this universal cauldron. At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. I can help you win this competition, but I ask Sect Master Sun to promise me that after winning this competition, you will immediately go to my twin Ox Mountain to settle down. What do you think? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiaoer was overjoyed and hurriedly asked, Prince Zhang, do you have any good ideas? Zhang Meng nodded. Sect Master Sun, don't worry. As long as I'm here, you definitely won't lose. At this moment, a woman in her 30s suddenly walked in. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, she suddenly sneered. Who is this? With you here, we won't lose. Who do you think you are? How dare you boast like this? As the woman spoke, she had already arrived in front of Sun Xiaoer and bowed. Master, disciple is back. Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer nodded. You're back. How'd it go? The middle-aged woman shook her head. Disciple went to many places but couldn't find it. After hearing the middle-aged woman's answer, Sun Xiaoer sighed. I know. You can go back and rest. After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, the middle-aged woman didn't leave. Instead, she turned her head to look at Zhang Meng and suddenly said, I was wondering who it was. Isn't this the person who came in this morning and said that he would help us? Speaking of this, the middle-aged woman's eyes turned cold. Master, who let this person in? Didn't we agree that no outsiders were allowed to come in during this period? Hearing the middle-aged woman's words, Lung Yelyo hurriedly said, Senior sister, this is Prince Zhang. I let him in. He said that he could help us. The middle-aged woman was Sun Xiaoer's eldest disciple, Han Guyun. In Kikyaman, other than Sun Xiaoer, she had the final say. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Han Guyun faintly said, Junior apprentice sister, at this critical juncture, we must not let down our guard. This person's background is unknown. I think it's better to be careful and let him leave quickly. Our Kikyaman's matters will be handled by ourselves. When Lung Yelyo heard this, he hurriedly said, Eldest senior sister, Prince Zhang can really help us. Just trust him this time. Han Guyun flatly refused. No, this is Kikyaman's business. How can we let outsiders interfere? Moreover, what ability does this person have to meddle in our affairs? Speaking of this, Han Guyun turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked with a sneer, Young master, do you have any good materials, or do you have some exquisite craftsmanship? Hearing Han Guyun's question, Zhang Meng shook his head. No, I don't know how to craft equipment, nor do I have any good materials. After hearing Zhang Meng's answer, Han Guyun fiercely glared at him and coldly shouted, Since you don't know anything, what are you still doing here? Get out! Hearing Han Guyun's angry shout, Lung Yelyo hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed her hand. Senior apprentice sister, he can really help us. If you don't believe me, you can ask my mother. When Han Guyun heard this, she turned to look at Sun Xiaoer and asked softly, Master, this person's background is unknown. We don't know what he is thinking, especially at this critical juncture. We shouldn't cause trouble. What's more, this person doesn't have any good materials or craftsmanship skills. Even if he wants to help us, how can he help us? This person is obviously a liar. Master, please give the order to drive this person out. After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Xiaoer couldn't help but frown. She slowly said, Although Prince Zhang doesn't have any good materials or craftsmanship skills, since he said he can help us, we will believe him for the time being. You don't need to say anything more. When Han Guyun heard this, she hurriedly said, Master, if we keep this person here, I'm afraid that this person will find out about our sect's secrets. That would be terrible. When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she turned to look at Zhang Meng and shook her head. I've already decided on this matter. You don't need to say anything more. After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Han Guyun was unwilling to give up. She slowly walked in front of Zhang Meng and coldly said, Boy, don't try to play any tricks. I'll be watching you. After saying this, Han Guyun left the hall with a sneer. Looking at Han Guyun's departing figure, Zhang Meng turned to look at Lung Yelyo and asked doubtfully, Why is her temper so bad? Lung Yelyo smiled and shook her head. Jean de Gaulle, don't be offended. Eldest senior sister's temper is like this. As long as she wants to say something, no one can stop her. It's just that after she said it, she even forgot about it. Hee hee. Sun Shower also nodded. Her temper is like this. She's frank and outspoken. But after so many years, Kikyaman was able to survive thanks to her. Zhang Ming naturally had nothing to say about other people's sex matters. He could only agree casually. Sun Shower pondered for a moment before slowly asking, by the way, Prince Zhang said that he can help me. How does Prince Zhang want to help us? Although Han Gian's question just now was very unreasonable, it was also what Sun Shower wanted to know. Although the person in front of her said that he could help her, how could he help her? This wasn't something that could just be said. It had to be done for real. Moreover, the Tiangongmen were very powerful. In terms of forging techniques, they were quite brilliant. Even after so many years of making equipment, she could not think of any way to beat them. Prince Zhang in front of her had admitted that he did not know how to make equipment. Since that was the case, how could he help her? In fact, trusting Zhang Ming was only a matter of helplessness for Sun Shower. When it came to competing with the Tiangongmen, Sun Shower had no way of winning. Kikyaman's sect was too small, and it was not safe enough. Therefore, they had not accumulated any high-grade materials. Suddenly, the Tiangongmen said that they wanted to compete. It was not easy to obtain a high-grade material to make equipment. High-grade materials were things that could only be encountered by chance. Even in 8 to 10 years, one might not even come across one, let alone now that they were in a hurry to use them. On the other hand, the Tiangongmen were different. Their sect was very powerful, and they had invited many experts. After so many years, who knew how many high-grade materials they had accumulated? If they wanted to compete with Kikyaman, they only needed to use a high-grade material to make equipment. There was no need to buy it now. This was the difference between the two sections. Under such circumstances, Sun Shower had long given up hope. She really could not think of any way to win this competition. After hearing Sun Shower's question, Zhang Ming pondered for a moment before he smiled and said, "May I know what kind of equipment sect leader Sun wants to make?" Sun Shower was stunned. For a moment, she was speechless. Chapter 338. After being stunned for a while, Sun Shower asked curiously, "Prince Zhang, what do you mean?" At this point, Sun Shower couldn't continue. Originally, she thought that even if the person in front of her didn't have superb production skills, since he was willing to help her and spoke so confidently, he should have some good materials. Otherwise, where did this person's confidence come from? Moreover, Sun Shower remembered very clearly that the person in front of her had wanted them to help make the black feather cloak. It would not be strange if the person who had the black feather cloak's feathers had other precious materials as well. After hearing Sun Shower's question, Zhang Ming did not beat around the bush and said directly, "Sect leader Sun, the competition between you and the Tianji sect is a test of defense. How do you want to test the defense?" Sun Shower calmed herself down and asked. Naturally, they wanted to use all kinds of weapons to test the defense of the two pieces of equipment. After hearing Sun Shower's answer, Zhang Ming nodded. "Since this is the test, sect leader Sun, please use the best materials in Kikyaman to make a piece of equipment. When the time comes, you'll definitely win." What? After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Shower stood up in shock and stared at Zhang Ming. After a while, she shouted sternly, "Are you playing with me?" Seeing this, Zhang Ming shook his head. "Don't worry, I won't lie to you. As long as you do as I say, you won't lose." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Shower weakly sat back in her seat and sighed. She muttered to herself, "Sigh, I knew it would be like this." Seeing her mother's disappointed look, Lung Yelyo quickly walked up to Zhang Ming and said angrily, "Are you lying to us?" Seeing the mother and daughter's disappointed look, Zhang Ming could only smile bitterly and shake his head. "Why would I lie to you? What good would it do me to do that? Right now, I just want to help you win this competition. Hurry up and return to Twin Bull Mountain with me." At this point, Zhang Ming sighed. You don't know how many things are waiting for me to do. I don't have time to lie to you. Lung Yoyo's eyes lit up when he heard that. Could it be that you have some special technique that can make our equipment's defense stronger? After hearing Lung Yoyo's words, Zhang Meng was just about to deny it, but his mind suddenly moved. He nodded and said with a smile, "You're really smart, seeing through it with just a hint. To tell you the truth, I really do have a technique that can increase a piece of equipment's defense by a lot." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiao's eyes lit up. Just as she was about to speak, Lung Yoyo spoke first. "Zhang Dege, since that's the case, why don't I find a piece of equipment for you to experiment with and show us? What do you think?" Zhang Meng shook his head after hearing this. "No, definitely not." Lung Yoyo asked curiously, "Why not?" Zhang Meng sighed. "To tell you the truth, this is a secret passed down in our family. We won't use it easily. Every time we use it, we have to pay a huge price." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yoyo hurriedly asked, "What's the price? If it's gold coins, can I ask my mother to give it to you?" Zhang Meng shook his head and said word by word, "It's not gold coins, it's lifespan. Every time it's used, it will reduce 3 years of lifespan. That's why the armor's defense is increased by several times." When Zhang Meng said that he had this technique, Sun Qiao did not believe it. After so many years, she had never heard of such a technique. If such a technique existed in the underworld, it would have been spread around long ago. How could she not have heard of it? After hearing Zhang Meng's explanation, she came to a realization. The reason why this technique did not spread was because every time it was used, it would consume 3 years of lifespan. This was not a joke. How many 3 years could a person have? Thinking of this, Sun Qiao felt grateful. Her doubtful mood immediately turned into guilt. She did not expect that the person in front of her would be willing to use 3 years of lifespan to help her win this battle. Looking at Zhang Meng's serious expression, Lung Yoyo's eyes turned red. She grabbed Zhang Meng's hand. "No, don't do this." Saying this, Lung Yoyo turned to look at Sun Qiao and said loudly, "Mother, even if we lose this time, we can't let Zhang Dege do this." Hearing this, Sun Qiao nodded and said slowly, "Lu is right. We can't let Prince Zhang pay such a huge price. This matter, let's just forget about it." Hearing this, Zhang Meng had a bad feeling. He quickly said, "It's okay. It's just 3 years of lifespan. As long as you agree to go to Twin Bull Mountain with me, it's worth it." Lung Yoyo shook her head vigorously. No, I won't agree." At the end, Lung Yoyo was so touched by Zhang Meng that she was about to cry. Seeing this, Zhang Meng could only smile and say, "It's okay. The fortune teller said that I can live for more than 100 years. It's okay even if I lose 3 years of lifespan." At this moment, Sun Qiao came back to her senses. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, she quickly waved her hand and said, "It's okay. Even if we lose this competition, we'll just join the Tiangolman. It's not a big deal. But if Prince Zhang uses this secret technique and loses 3 years of lifespan, I'll feel bad about it. It's better not to mention this again." Seeing that the mother and daughter had rejected his good intentions, Zhang Meng was helpless and could only say, "Actually, it's not as serious as you think. Although I lost 3 years of lifespan when I used the technique. But in the future, I'll slowly make up for it. I'll be able to make up for it. So, please don't worry." Hearing this, Lung Yoyo was overjoyed. She quickly asked, "Then how can I make up for the 3 years of lifespan that I lost?" Seeing that Lung Yoyo was determined to clarify this matter, Zhang Meng's mind raced. He suddenly had an idea and said with a smile, "As long as you eat some supplements, you'll naturally be able to make up for the lost income." Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiao secretly nodded her head. In this world, there were many precious elixirs that could cure hundreds of diseases and extend one's lifespan. The person in front of her said that eating supplements could make up for the lost lifespan. It should be credible. Since there was a way to make up for it, Sun Qiao's heart relaxed a little. She said with a smile, "Prince Zhang, since there's a way to make up for it, how about this? You used the secret technique for us once. We'll kick him in to find elixirs for you to make up for your lost lifespan. What do you think? After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Zhang Ming hurriedly nodded his head. Okay, no problem. This way, it'll be the best of both worlds. I won't lose my lifespan, and you can win this competition. Chapter 339. When Leng Yoyo heard that Zhang Ming would have to consume 3 years of his lifespan to use this skill, she dismissed the thought after thinking about the side effects of using this skill. Sun Qiao, on the other hand, was still skeptical of Zhang Ming's words. She had never heard of such a magical skill. Although Sun Qiao wanted Zhang Ming to try and see the effects of this skill, she couldn't bring herself to say it because the side effects of this skill were too strong. However, for Sun Qiao to place all her hopes on this skill, Sun Qiao still couldn't feel at ease. Sun Qiao turned to look at Zhang Ming and said with a smile, "If Prince Zhang were to use this skill once, how many spiritual herbs would you need to replenish your lost lifespan?" As she said this, Sun Qiao was also thinking about where to find some spiritual herbs to let Prince Zhang try it once so that she wouldn't have to worry. After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Zhang Ming immediately understood her thoughts. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said. He pondered for a while and said slowly, "According to the dosage, about 1,000-year-old ginseng would be enough." 1,000-year-old ginseng? Sun Qiao exclaimed when she heard Zhang Ming's words. "Prince Zhang, do you need 1,000-year-old ginseng to use this skill once?" Zhang Ming nodded. "Something like that. 1,000-year-old ginseng should be enough to replenish my lifespan." After listening to Zhang Ming's affirmative answer, Sun Qiao couldn't help but frown deeply. The value of 1,000-year-old ginseng was definitely immeasurable. Moreover, it wasn't easy to find 1,000-year-old ginseng. A rare spiritual herb like this was a treasure that could only be found by chance. Every 1,000-year-old ginseng that appeared would cause many people to fight for it. After so many years, although Kikyaman had accumulated a lot of wealth, it still wasn't enough compared to the value of 1,000-year-old ginseng. Thinking of this, Sun Qiao's expression couldn't help but change. A moment later, she calmed down and sighed. If we need to consume 1,000-year-old ginseng every time we use a skill, then it seems that we really can't afford it. When Zhang Ming heard this, he waved his hand and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. As long as sect leader Sun agrees to my request, you don't have to worry about the 1,000-year-old ginseng. I'll settle it myself." At this point, Zhang Ming paused before continuing. "Sect Master Sun, I know you may not believe in this skill of mine, but I can use it once in advance to let you see it before making a decision. What do you think?" When Sun Qiao heard this, she was shocked. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, "Prince Zhang, let's just forget about it. Using this skill consumes so much energy every time. It's too wasteful. I think we should just forget about it." Although Sun Qiao said that this matter was over, Zhang Ming could clearly see the anticipation in her eyes. He couldn't blame Sun Qiao for being suspicious. No matter who it was, they would be suspicious. Needless to say, Sun Qiao had never heard of such a magical skill. Even Zhang Ming had never heard of it. This skill was just something that Zhang Ming casually said. His purpose was naturally to let Sun Qiao know that Zhang Ming would pay a huge price to help them. As long as Sun Qiao was grateful to Zhang Ming, she would definitely listen to him and go to Twin Bull Mountain with him. And this was Zhang Ming's ultimate goal. Seeing that Sun Qiao didn't believe him, Zhang Ming could only smile and say, "Sect Master Sun, you don't have to worry about me. I've been practicing this skill for many years. Now I can already master the technique of using it. If it's just a simple use, it won't consume much of my lifespan. It'll only consume a few months of my lifespan. When the time comes, I just need to eat some simple elixirs, and it will naturally be replenished. So, Sect Master Sun, don't worry. I'll be fine." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Qiao was immediately overjoyed. She quickly asked, "Prince Zhang, if you want to test it, how do you want to test it?" Hearing Sun Qiao's question, Zhang Ming shook his head and said with a smile, "I don't know how you and the Tyngoman compete. You just have to test it according to the competition method at that time. Speaking up to this point, Zhang Ming's tone paused for a moment before he continued. Just like what you said just now, if you're competing with the Heaven's Craftsman sect in terms of defense power, can't we just test the defense power of your equipment? As a manufacturer of equipment, Kikyaman naturally had a complete set of equipment to test defense. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xiaoer immediately stood up and said to Zhang Ming, "Okay, then let's go test it now." Hearing this, Zhang Ming also stood up and said indifferently, "Okay, then let's go test it now." Seeing this, Sun Xiaoer immediately walked towards the door impatiently. After exiting the door, Sun Xiaoer called for another disciple and asked him to go and prepare. Then, she turned her head and said to Zhang Ming, "Prince Zhang, let's go." The three of them exited the guest hall and walked towards the south of the courtyard. There was a separate courtyard in the south of the courtyard. This was the place where equipment was made. Pushing open the door of this small courtyard, there was a two-story building in front of them. Sun Xiaoer led Zhang Ming and Lung Yelyo to the door of this two-story building. After opening the door, she led Zhang Ming and Lung Yelyo in. The three of them came to a room at the end of the corridor. Sun Xiaoer then turned her head to look at Zhang Ming and explained, "Prince Zhang, this is the place where we test our equipment." As she spoke, Sun Xiaoer had already pushed open the door and walked in. Zhang Ming walked into the room and saw more than 10 weapons hanging on the wall opposite the door. In the middle of the room, there was a slightly larger wooden platform. At this moment, the disciple that Sun Xiaoer instructed earlier walked in with a piece of leather armor. Sun Xiaoer instructed the disciple to place the leather armor on the wooden platform and asked him to leave. Then, she turned her head to look at Zhang Ming and said, "It's actually very simple to test the defense of our equipment." As she spoke, Sun Xiaoer pointed at the weapons on the wall and explained, "The weapons on the wall are all hung in order. The leftmost saber is made of ordinary iron. If the leather armor can withstand the saber's slash, it will pass the most basic test." Speaking of this, Sun Xiaoer pointed to the rest of the weapons and said, "The rest of the weapons from left to right are all arranged according to the quality of the materials. The one on the far right is the best weapon." Speaking of this, Sun Xiaoer paused for a moment before continuing, "Actually, according to the defense of the leather armor, as long as it can withstand the slash of the second sword, it will be considered a qualified leather armor." Chapter 340. Lung Yelyo pointed at the weapons on the wall and continued to explain, "Even if it's a good leather armor, it can only withstand the third weapon's attack. If it can withstand the fourth weapon's attack, then it can be considered the best leather armor." Speaking up to this point, Sun Xiaoer pointed at the leather armor on the wooden platform and said with a smile, "This leather armor is actually a failed leather armor. It doesn't have any defensive power, and it can't even withstand the first blade." Sun Xiaoer turned her head to look at Zhang Ming and asked solemnly, "Prince Zhang, if you use your skill on this leather armor, how high would its defensive power be? How many blades would it be able to withstand?" Zhang Ming looked at the leather armor on the wooden platform. This leather armor was indeed, as Sun Xiaoer said, a failed leather armor. On the leather armor, there were a few holes left. It was probably a failed product. Zhang Ming casually glanced at the leather armor, then turned his head to look at Sun Xiaoer and asked with a smile, "Sect Leader Sun, I've already said that this skill of mine can be adjusted. If I want to use it to its full potential, it will take 3 years of my life. If it's the simplest skill, it might only take a few days of my life." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Ming looked at the weapons on the wall and said with a smile, "There are a total of 10 weapons on the wall. How about this? I'll use half of my power to make this leather armor withstand the 6th blade's attack. Sect Leader Sun, what do you think?" After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xiaoer was shocked and quickly asked, "Really? Can you really make this leather armor withstand the 6th blade's attack?" Zhang Ming casually nodded, "No problem." Sun Xiaoer took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She gently nodded. Then, "Prince Zhang, please use your skill." After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Zhang Ming immediately raised his hands and waved them in front of his eyes. At the same time, he muttered something. After a while, he pointed at the leather armor. Okay, Sect Leader's son, you can test it now. Sun Qiao widened her eyes and looked at Zhang Ming. She asked in confusion, Prince Zhang, is this enough? After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Zhang Ming asked in confusion, is there something wrong? Sun Qiao wiped the cold sweat on her forehead and said softly, such a magical skill. Shouldn't there be some kind of phenomenon? For example, a bright golden light or something. Hearing this, Zhang Ming shook his head with a wry smile. Sect Leader's son, there's no need for those fake things. Hurry up and test it. If the time passes, I'm afraid my skill will be wasted. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Qiao was shocked. She hurriedly asked someone to take the sixth blade from the wall. When the disciple was about to use this blade to cut the leather armor, he was stopped by Sun Qiao. Give me the blade, I'll do the test myself. Taking the blade from the disciple, Sun Qiao walked to the front of the leather armor and turned to look at Zhang Ming. Is this really okay? Zhang Ming nodded and said confidently, no problem. Sect Leader's son, please do your test. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Qiao raised the long blade, widened her eyes, and slashed at the leather armor. The saber slashed down and hit the leather armor on the stage. Sun Quainer believed that with the sharpness of a sixth blade, it wouldn't be difficult to cut the leather armor in half. After so many years, Sun Qiao had only used the fourth saber from the left. She had never touched any of the other sabers that were hung on the wall. Because of the defense of leather armor, unless it was made of super strong materials, it was considered a good leather armor if it could withstand the attack of the fourth blade. Currently, Sun Qiao was holding the sixth saber. According to the order on the wall, each saber was equivalent to a level 6 weapon. If the leather armor could withstand this attack, it meant that the defense of the leather armor had reached level 6. It could be said that Sun Qiao had never seen a leather armor with level 6 defense. Lung Yelyo was so nervous that he held his breath. He stared at the leather armor on the stage and didn't even dare to blink. The blade in Sun Qiao's hand hit the leather armor. The expected scene of the sword being cut in half didn't occur. Instead, the sword was blocked by the leather armor, and the sword couldn't go any further. Sun Qiao's eyes were wide open as she stared blankly at the scene. After a moment, she kept her blade, raised it high, and slashed down again. This time, Sun Qiao raised her hand higher and used more strength. She almost used up all the strength in her body. Unfortunately, the long saber in her hand once again slashed at the leather armor. Just like before, it was blocked by the failed leather armor. Seeing that the leather armor blocked the second attack, Lung Yelyo couldn't hold it in anymore. He went forward and held Sun Qiao's hand and shouted, Mother, it's really good. This leather armor really blocked the sixth blade. We succeeded. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Sun Qiao slowly kept her blade and passed it to the disciple who was waiting at the side. She then turned to look at Zhang Ming with a face full of disbelief. Prince Zhang, you really did it. How did you do it? Zhang Ming heard and laughed in his heart. The truth was definitely not to be told to them. Sect Leader's son, how was my skill? It didn't disappoint you, right? After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Qiao nodded and said with some emotion, I didn't expect Prince Zhang to have such a powerful skill. I really didn't expect it. Zhang Ming heard and waved his hand. Actually, this skill isn't very useful. It can only be maintained for a short period of time. After a long time, the effect on the leather armor will disappear and it will return to its original state. I see. Sun Qiao shook her head in disappointment. What a pity. It would be great if this effect could be maintained for a long time. After hearing Sun Qiao sigh, Zhang Ming hurriedly waved his hand. That's not important. Although the effect on the leather armor only lasted for a short period of time, I think that during this period of time, we should be able to win the competition. Sect Leader's son, don't you think this makes sense? After hearing this, Sun Qiao nodded and said with a sigh, if this effect can be maintained for a long time, Then, before Sun Xiaoer could finish her words, Lung Yelyo interrupted her from the side. Mother, didn't you tell me that people shouldn't be greedy? As long as we can win this competition, it's better than anything else. After hearing this, Sun Xiaoer turned her head and stroked Lung Yelyo's hair. She smiled and said, "This child is starting to teach his mother a lesson." After saying this, Sun Xiaoer paused for a moment before continuing. That's right. As long as we can win this competition, that's enough. Chapter 341. After testing the defensive capabilities of the leather armor, the three of them returned to the living room. After Sun Xiaoer asked for tea to be served, she turned her head to look at Zhang Ming and asked with a smile, "Prince Zhang, we've really troubled you this time. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't have kept this competition a secret from you. We would have definitely lost." Zhang Ming heard this and shook his head. "It's all right, it's nothing. Moreover, I'll have to rely on sect leader Sun in the future." At this point, Zhang Ming paused for a moment before continuing. "I hope sect leader Sun won't tell anyone about the fact that I can buff the leather armor. If the other party is on guard, I'm afraid it will be disadvantageous to us." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xiaoer nodded. "Of course, only the three of us know about this. There won't be a fourth person who knows." At this point, Sun Xiaoer pondered for a moment before continuing to ask, "All right, I heard Prince Zhang say that you want us to go to MT Shuangniu with you." Zhang Ming heard this and nodded. "That's indeed the case. I originally wanted to ask sect leader Sun to send someone to make the black feather cloak for me. Now that I see Kikyaman here, it's indeed inappropriate. Even if you win this competition, it's hard to guarantee that Tianwu won't cause trouble for you in the future. Since that's the case, why don't you just move to my MT Shuangniu? Firstly, you can make equipment for me. Secondly, as long as you go to MT Shuangniu, I can guarantee that the Tiangongmen won't dare to cause trouble for you." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xiaoer asked doubtfully, "Prince Zhang, the Tiangongmen are very strong. Not only are their crafting skills outstanding, but they are also very skilled in martial arts. Furthermore, they have the numbers advantage. Aren't you afraid that we'll be in danger if we go to MT Shuangniu?" After listening to Sun Xiaoer's words, Zhang Ming shook his head. "Sect leader Sun, don't worry. As long as I dare to let you go, I won't be afraid of anyone finding trouble with me." When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she probed, "Prince Zhang, what if the Tiangongmen really don't let us off and go to Mount Shuangniu to cause trouble for us? Do you really have a way to deal with them?" After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Zhang Ming sneered. "If the Tiangongmen want to go, then stay here obediently. If they don't know what's good for them, then I don't mind playing with them." Seeing that Zhang Ming said it so easily, Sun Xiaoer was a little relieved. She wanted to ask about this matter clearly, but she also knew that every sect had its own secrets. If she asked again, she would be suspected of prying into other people's secrets. Doing so would not be good. Thinking up to this point, Sun Xiaoer asked again, "Prince Zhang, if we really go to Mount Twin Bulls, what kind of equipment do you have for us to craft?" Speaking up to this point, Sun Xiaoer paused for a moment before continuing. "Prince Zhang, you also know that although there aren't many people in Kikyaman, if we don't have equipment to craft, it will be difficult for us to sustain ourselves." Although Sun Xiaoer did not say it clearly, Zhang Ming already understood. "Sect leader Sun, you don't have to worry about this. If you go Mount Twin Bulls, I think you can split into two groups. One group will craft high-grade equipment, and the other group will find some ordinary people to craft ordinary equipment." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Ming pondered for a moment before continuing. "To be honest, I want to build an auction house in Mount Twin Bulls. When the time comes, the equipment that you craft, I mean the high-grade equipment, will be auctioned off in the auction house. When the time comes, I can guarantee that Kikyaman's expenses will not be a problem." Auction house. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xiaoer exclaimed, "Prince Zhang, don't tell me you want to open an auction house." Zhang Ming nodded. "Indeed, my plan is to gradually build Mount Twin Bulls into the largest auction house. Everyone who wants to buy high-grade equipment will come here to buy equipment. Speaking up to this point, Zhang Meng smiled and continued. In order to build this auction house, I've already gone to the Southern County branch of the Tianji sect and asked branch leader Sun's third disciple, Zhang Leji, to be my permanent consultant. In the future, he will supervise the construction of this auction house. Zhang Leji? Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer was shocked again. The Southern County branch of the Tianji sect was very famous in the Southern County. Branch leader Sun Xinjing's 8 disciples, other than the 6 to 8 disciples who had just joined, were all people with superb skills. It was already very good to be able to invite one person, but Prince Zhang actually asked the Tianji sect's third disciple to be his permanent consultant. This was really too unbelievable. Sun Xiaoer composed herself and asked tentatively, "Could it be that Zhang Laji is really willing to go to Mount Twin Bulls with you?" Zhang Ming nodded. He has already agreed. Now, he is rushing to Mount Twin Bulls with the 4 Tijin gangs that Sun Xinjing gave me. Tijin gangs? Sun Xiaoer exclaimed again. Could it be that branch leader Sun gave you the Tijin gangs? Then, before Zhang Ming could answer, Sun Xiaoer muttered to herself, "That's impossible. The 8 Tijin gangs of the Tianji sect's Southern County branch are the treasures of the sect. Even Sun Xinjing doesn't have the authority to give them away." Zhang Ming nodded when he heard this. Sect leader Sun is right. These 4 Tijin gangs were indeed not given to me by Old Man Sunday. They were lent to me. Sun Xiaoer sighed when she heard this. The Southern County branch of the Tianji sect has countless secrets. For so many years, no one dared to have any ideas about the Southern County branch. This is all because the Southern County branch has 8 Tijin gangs guarding it, so no one dared to have any ideas about these secrets. I didn't expect Sect Leader Sun to be willing to lend you 4 Tijin gangs. This is really a huge favor. Zhang Ming shook his head. Sect Leader Sun, actually, the Tianji sect took advantage of me in this matter. Oh, Sun Xiaoer suddenly turned her head to look at Zhang Ming and asked in confusion, "Prince Zhang, the Southern County branch lent you such an important thing. How did it become taking advantage of you?" Zhang Ming stretched out 2 fingers and sighed. Old Man Sun used these 4 Tijin gangs to exchange for 2 of my conditions. Didn't they take advantage of me? When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she looked at Zhang Ming in shock. She could not understand why he had only agreed to 2 conditions of the Southern County branch in exchange for 4 Tijin gangs. How did it become taking advantage of him? Lung Yelyo, who was at the side, also shook Sun Xiaoer's arm and asked in surprise, "Mother, I heard that the Tianji sect is very powerful. Almost every county has their branch. Are they very powerful?" Sun Xiaoer nodded when she heard this. Basically, all the important places in Anwu country have mechanisms made by the Tianji sect. It can be said that the Tianji sect is the sect with the highest attainments in mechanism skills in Anwu country. The strength of the Tianji sect is almost the same as the Tiangongmen. The only difference is that the Tiangongmen make the equipment, while the Tianji sect makes the mechanisms. Chapter 342. Looking at Zhang Ming, who was smiling without saying a word, Sun Xiaoer suddenly hesitated for a moment and asked, "Prince Zhang, if you ask us to move to Mount Shuangniu, will we still be Kikyaman in the future?" Sun Xiaoer did not think about this question at first because she did not think that it would be of any help to her. However, after the test, just now, Sun Xiaoer's heart was filled with confidence for this competition. Since they had a chance to win this competition, they had to face the next problem. The ultimate goal of this competition with the Tiangongmen was to make Kikyaman surrender and join the Tiangongmen. If that was the case, Kikyaman's name would naturally disappear from the pugilistic world. In the future, there would be no Kikyaman's name, only the Tiangongmen's name. The reason why Sun Xiaoer refused to join the Tiangongmen was naturally because she did not want Kikyaman's name to disappear from the pugilistic world. However, if Zhang Ming won this competition for them, they would not have to join the Tiangongmen. However, Prince Zhang wanted them to move to Mount Shuangniu, which was Prince Zhang's territory. If they were not allowed to use Kikyomin's name by then, in Sun Shower's eyes, even if Prince Zhang won this competition for them, it would be meaningless. This was because Sun Shower insisted that she did not want Kikyomin's name to disappear from the pugilistic world. After asking this question, Sun Shower looked at Zhang Meng nervously. She wanted to hear his thoughts. When he heard Sun Shower's question, Zhang Meng smiled and waved his hand. Chief Sun, you've misunderstood. Even if I let you join Mount Shuangniu, the name Kikyomin will not disappear. At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. What I'm thinking is that Mount Shuangniu will become bigger and bigger in the future. When that time comes, Kikyomin won't be the only sect in Mount Shuangniu. There will be many other sects developing in Mount Shuangniu. It's like everyone moving to a city. Just staying in the city won't change anything. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Shower frowned and asked in confusion, Prince Zhang, what's the point of doing this? Zhang Meng smiled and said, Actually, if you all move to Mount Shuangniu right now, it will definitely be the wisest choice. This is because Mount Shuangniu is still in its development stage. Those who move there first will naturally have a certain advantage. As for me, turning Mount Shuangniu into the biggest auction house is what I want to do the most. Zhang Meng said this, but he did not actually say what he really wanted to say. His true meaning was to find a way out for the people of Mount Shuangniu. He would never allow his brothers and sisters of Mount Shuangniu to bare their teeth and brandish their weapons to rob others. He would never allow such a thing to happen. Sun Shower was overjoyed when she heard Zhang Meng's answer. If Prince Zhang was telling the truth, then it would definitely be an opportunity for Kikyomin. Looking at the backs of Lung Yelyo and Zhang Meng leaving, Sun Shower was very happy. She did not expect that the competition that had made her feel despair would be so miraculously resolved. At this moment, Han Guyun, who had just left the hall, suddenly walked in from the main door. Master, you haven't rested yet? Sun Shower nodded and pointed to the chair next to her. She smiled and said, Sit down and talk. What's the matter? After Han Guyun sat down, she asked softly, Master, are you still upset about the competition? Sun Shower shook her head when she heard this. It's fine. Sun Shower turned to look at Han Guyun and said, By the way, do you still have that wild bear skin? Han Guyun nodded. Yes, it's still in the warehouse. Master, do you want to use it? Sun Shower nodded. Take out the wild bear skin tomorrow. We'll use it to make equipment for the competition. After hearing Sun Shower's words, Han Muyin frowned. Master, even if we have a wild bear skin, it's useless. Sun Shower waved her hand. You don't have to worry about this. I know what to do. By the way, how much wild silk do we have in the warehouse? I want to use wild silk to connect the seams of this wild bear skin. When Han Guyun heard this, a trace of embarrassment appeared on her face. Master, we don't have much wild silk to begin with, but during this period of time, we can't buy wild silk. I don't know what's going on. After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Shower couldn't help but frown. Have you checked all the shops in the South County City? Han Guyun nodded. This disciple has been going to the shop for the past few days, but I haven't been able to find wild silk. At this point, Han Guyun also frowned. Master, I've always felt that it was very strange. Today, I asked and found out that the wild silk in their inventory had been bought out as early as 10 days ago. After saying this, Han Guyun turned her head to look at Sun Shower and asked tentatively, Master, who would buy these natural silkworms? Could they be from the Heaven's Craftsman faction? After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Shower pondered for a moment before nodding. It's very likely that the Tiangongmen bought all the materials we needed in advance in order to win this competition. At this point, Sun Shower sighed and continued. Today, Lil Lu went to buy a diamond monster skin. Li Jin from the west of the city hunted a diamond monster, but the people from the Heaven's Craftsman faction bought it first. I think they were afraid that we would win this competition and wanted to be foolproof, so they bought all the materials we needed in advance. When Han Guyun heard this, her expression suddenly changed and she hurriedly asked, Master, if these things were really done by the Tiangongmen, then what should we do? Sun Shower sneered. What else can we do? The Taiyangalmen are very powerful. Even if we want to compete with them, I'm afraid it will be very difficult. At this point, Sun Xiao's tone paused before she continued. Xiao Yun, in the next period of time, you will still lead people to look for these materials. Remember, even if the Taiyangalmen bought all these materials, you should not have a conflict with them. Just go to the shop every day to inquire about the news. After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Han Guyun was a little anxious. Master, if this is the case, and the Taiyangalmen bought all the materials, then what should we do? Are we going to admit defeat just like that? After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Xiao waved her hand and sneered. Xiao Yun, you don't have to worry about this matter. I have my own plans. You just need to go to the city every day to buy the materials. As for whether you can buy them or not, don't force it. Chapter 343. After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Han Guyun became even more anxious. Master, if we don't have good materials, won't we lose without a doubt? Sun Xiao turned to look at Han Guyun and said with a smile, the Taiyangalmen won't leave good materials for us. Even if we want to force them, I'm afraid we won't get any good materials. Since that's the case, we might as well not compete with them for those materials. Let them fight for them. Han Guyun hurriedly asked, Master, since that's the case, do we still need to go to the shops in the city? Sun Xiao smiled. Of course we have to go. At least we have to put on a show to make the Taiyangalmen happy. After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Han Guyun's eyes suddenly lit up. She asked in surprise, Master, are you sure you can win this competition? Sun Xiao smiled and waved her hand. Xiao Yun, don't worry about this. I know what I'm doing. Seeing the joy on Sun Xiao's face, Han Guyun, who had been upset, seemed to calm down a lot. Suddenly, Han Guyun raised her head and said in a low voice, Master, disciple has something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. Sun Xiao glanced at Han Guyun and asked curiously, Why are you so nervous? What's the matter? Hearing Sun Xiao's question, Han Guyun gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, Master, disciple has noticed that there's something wrong with second junior sister these days. Sun Xiao heard this and asked doubtfully, Is there something wrong with Xiaoyu? Han Guyun nodded. During this time, disciple found out that second junior sister has been in contact with the Taiyangalmen. After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Xiao's face suddenly changed. She asked, Is this true? Hearing Sun Xiao's question, Han Guyun hurriedly nodded. Master, this is absolutely true. Sun Xiao frowned and asked, How do you know? Han Guyun replied softly, Master, just 3 days ago, disciple saw a second junior sister talking with a Taiyangalmen disciple in a small alley in the west of the city. When Sun Xiao heard this, she quickly asked, Are you sure? Is that really Xiaoyu? Hearing this, Han Guyun hurriedly shook her head. Master, this disciple is absolutely not mistaken. That person is indeed second junior sister. After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Xiao secretly sighed in her heart. Although his eldest disciple, Han Guyun, was a woman, she had a straightforward temperament. She never hid anything in her heart. She would say whatever she wanted to say. She could be regarded as outspoken. The second disciple, and Han Yu, had a completely different temperament from Han Guyun. And Han Yu was introverted and didn't like to talk much. But most people like her had their own ideas. Seeing that her master didn't say anything, Han Guyun asked tentatively, Master, do you think second junior sister will? Before Han Guyun could finish her words, Sun Xiao waved her hand and interrupted her. All right, that's enough. Go and rest. Hearing this, Han Guyun could only stand up. After bowing to her master, she walked out of the door. Just as she reached the door, she heard her master's voice again from behind her. Xiaoyun, everything I just said, including Xiaoyu's matter, don't tell anyone. Remember? Hearing Sun Xiao's words, Han Guyun hurriedly turned around and responded, then left the living room. As soon as Han Guyun left the living room, Sun Xiao's face showed a trace of pain. Anyone who knew that their disciple wanted to betray them would definitely feel bad in their heart. Lung Yelyo left the living room with Zhang Ming and went straight to the guest room in the side courtyard. In the corner of the courtyard, there was a room specially prepared for guests. As soon as the two entered the room, Lang Yelyo hurriedly closed the door and turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked, "Jean de Ge, who taught you that skill?" Looking at the curious Lang Yelyo, Zhang Meng pretended to be mysterious. "Of course it was passed down from my ancestors." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lang Yelyo rubbed her hands together and carefully asked, "Jean de Ge, can you leave it to me?" At this point, Lang Yelyo didn't wait for Zhang Meng's reply. An inexplicable glint appeared in his eyes. "If I can learn this skill, I'll be too powerful. At that time, I'll definitely use this skill to help my mother deal with the hateful Heaven's Craftsman faction." After saying this, Lang Yelyo lowered her head and looked at Zhang Meng, saying excitedly, "Jean de Ge, if you do that, my mother will definitely be very happy, right?" Lang Yelyo's pretty little face was already flushed red from excitement. Seeing this, Zhang Meng sighed, "I don't know if your mother is happy or not, but you will definitely be unhappy." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lang Yelyo's eyes suddenly widened and she asked in confusion, "Why? Why would I be unhappy?" Hearing this, Zhang Meng first found a chair and sat down, then said indifferently, "Think about it. Every time you use it, you will consume 3 years of your lifespan. If you use it carelessly, then very soon your hair will be white, your face will be full of wrinkles, and you will become an old woman. At that time, will you be happy?" Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lang Yelyo subconsciously covered her face and asked in a deep voice, "Really? Really? Will I really have a head full of white hair, a face full of wrinkles, and become an old woman?" Seeing Lang Yelyo's nervous expression, Zhang Meng laughed in his heart, but said with a serious expression, "I've already said that every time you use it, you will consume 3 years of your lifespan. If you use it too many times, you will definitely become an old woman. Is there a problem with that?" Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lang Yelyo hurriedly took a few steps back and distanced herself from Zhang Meng, as if being close to Zhang Meng would also make her become an old woman. Seeing Lang Yelyo's pale face due to nervousness, Zhang Meng asked again, "How is it? Do you still want to learn?" Hearing this, Lang Yelyo widened her eyes and stared at Zhang Meng. After a long while, she suddenly nodded again and asked tentatively, If I use it less often, will I not become like that?" Hearing Lang Yelyo's trembling voice, Zhang Meng said calmly, "That's true. Let me calculate. You're 18 years old this year. So how many times can you use it? After using it once, you'll become 21 years old. After using it twice, you'll become 24 years old. Using it." Stop talking. Before Zhang Meng could finish, he was interrupted by Lang Yelyo. "Jean de Ge, I beg you, stop talking. I'm scared." Hearing this, Zhang Meng couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed out loud. "Since you know, do you still want to learn?" Hearing Zhang Meng's question, Lang Yelyo couldn't help but frown. The expression on her face began to change. Gradually, tears appeared in her eyes, and this layer of mist became thicker and thicker. In the end, it condensed into tears and fell from her eyes. Chapter 344. Seeing Lang Yelyo's pitiful appearance, Zhang Meng could not bear it and quickly said, "Don't worry. If you don't want to learn it, then don't. What's there to be sad about?" Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lang Yelyo wiped her tears and said angrily, "I won't learn it. Why wouldn't I learn it? I must learn it. I must learn this skill and defeat the hateful Tiangongmen for my mother." Zhang Meng asked curiously as he looked at Lang Yelyo, whose face was full of tears but whose eyes were filled with determination. "Hey, are you stupid? Aren't you afraid of becoming an old woman?" Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lang Yelyo's tears flowed even more. She shook her head vigorously and said loudly, "I'm afraid. I want to learn it too. My mother raised me and sacrificed so much. Now that I've grown up, I want to help her." Zhang Meng asked tentatively, "Even if you become an old woman, it's okay?" Lang Yelyo nodded vigorously. "Yes, as long as I can help my mother, I'm willing to become an old woman. Zhang Ming asked again. You won't regret it? Hearing Zhang Ming's question, Lung Yelyo couldn't hold it in anymore. She covered her face with both hands and burst into tears. Lung Yelyo shook her head vigorously as she cried. She choked and said, I don't regret it. I really don't regret it. I won't regret it. Sob, sob. Looking at Lung Yelyo, who was crying so hard, Zhang Ming stood up and walked to her side. He patted her shoulder and said with a smile, Miss Lung, you don't have to worry about this. What you think won't happen. As soon as Zhang Ming finished speaking, Lung Yelyo's crying stopped abruptly. She looked up at Zhang Ming and asked in surprise, Jean de Go, are you saying that even if I use this skill, I won't become an old woman? Zhang Ming shook his head. As long as I don't teach you, you won't become an old woman. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Lung Yelyo was stunned for a moment before he angrily said, Why can't you teach me? Zhang Ming sighed. Miss Lung, have you forgotten what I just said? This is our family's ancestral skill. At this point, Zhang Ming turned to look at Lung Yelyo and asked, Hey, do you know what ancestral skill is? Hearing Zhang Ming's question, Lung Yelyo shook his head. Closely after that, he nodded. I see. My family also has a unique skill passed down from our ancestors. I heard from my mom that she would impart her unique skill to me. When Zhang Ming heard this, he nodded and asked with a smile, Miss Lung, in that case, will your mother pass on your family's unique skill to outsiders? After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Lung Yelyo was stunned again and muttered to herself, Although most of the unique skills can be passed on to eldest senior sister and second senior sister, my mother also said that there is a unique skill that can only be passed on to me and not to outsiders. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Ming suddenly clapped his hands and said with a smile, Do you understand now? Hearing this, Lung Yelyo shook her head and looked at Zhang Ming in confusion. I don't understand. Seeing this, Zhang Ming sighed. Why don't you understand? An ancestral skill can only be passed down to one's own family. Outsiders definitely can't learn it. Otherwise, why would it be called an ancestral skill? At this point, Zhang Ming patted Lung Yelyo's shoulder and asked with a smile, Do you understand now? Lung Yelyo nodded. I understand. Seeing that Lung Yelyo understood, Zhang Ming heaved a sigh of relief and clapped his hands. Since you understand, you naturally understand why you can't become an old woman. Lung Yelyo nodded and said hesitantly, But I want to learn. Hearing this, Zhang Ming flatly refused. An ancestral skill can only be passed down to one's own family. It can't be passed down to outsiders. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Lung Yelyo frowned and stood there in a pitiful daze for a long time. Then, she suddenly raised her hand and grabbed Zhang Ming's arm, shook it coquettishly, and said in a coquettish voice, But I really want to learn. I beg you, Jean de Gueux, teach me this decision. After saying this, Lung Yelyo saw that Zhang Ming didn't say anything. She grabbed Zhang Ming's arm again and shook it a few times and said pitifully, Jean de Gueux, at most, I'll repay you in the future. What do you think? After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Ming's heart skipped a beat. He smiled and asked, Miss Lung, how are you going to repay me in the future? Hearing this, Lung Yelyo frowned and blinked her big eyes, then said, How about this? I'll make a good equipment for you in the future. What do you think? Hearing this, Zhang Ming shook his head in disappointment. No, my family's ancestral skill is so powerful. If I only exchange it for a piece of equipment, wouldn't I lose out? No, definitely not. Hearing Zhang Ming's words, Lung Yelyo frowned again and thought for a while before saying again, If that's the case, 2 pieces of equipment. What do you think? I beg you, Jean de Gueux, just give it to me. Hearing this, Zhang Ming was even more disappointed. According to this progress, Lung Yelyo might say something like 10 pieces of equipment in the end. Thinking of this, Zhang Ming hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, Miss Lung, let's not talk about the equipment. I'm not bragging, but I can get as many pieces of equipment as I want. You don't have to exchange with me. Saying this, Zhang Ming turned to look at Lung Yelyo and blinked. If you want to learn, you'd better find another way to repay me. Do you understand? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelio's frown deepened. It was almost like a fried dough twist. Jean de Gue, but I really can't think of any other way, other than the equipment. What else can I repay you with? Saying this, Lung Yelio's eyes suddenly lit up. She smiled and said, Jean de Gue, do you want me to use spiritual herbs to exchange with you? The moment Lung Yelio's eyes lit up, Zhang Meng really thought that she was enlightened. He didn't expect her to still be so insensible. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng felt a little bored. He clapped his hands and shook off Lung Yelio's hand. Miss Lung, since you're not sincere with me, let's not talk about this. As he spoke, Zhang Meng had already turned around and said with a smile, Aya, the weather today is so good. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelio looked at the dark night sky outside the window with some confusion. She didn't understand how he could tell that the weather outside was good. Zhang Meng returned to his seat and looked at Lung Yelio, who was standing there motionlessly. He asked curiously, Miss Lung, don't you need to sleep? After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Lung Yelio reacted and rolled her eyes at Zhang Meng. You don't need to sleep. Zhang Meng asked curiously, since you also need to sleep, why don't you go back and sleep? Why are you still standing there without moving? Chapter 345. Lung Yelio quickly walked in front of Zhang Meng and whispered, Jean de Gue, please give this skill to me. I'm begging you. Zhang Meng shook his head when he heard this. Miss Lung, I've already said that this is my ancestral skill. It's impossible for me to pass it on to outsiders. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelio was stunned. Then, she grabbed Zhang Meng's arm and shook it vigorously. She muttered, Jean de Gue, then tell me, how can you pass it on to me? Zhang Meng thought for a moment and suddenly laughed. He turned to look at Lung Yelio and said seriously, the rules of the family cannot be changed. If you want to learn, you can't be an outsider. At this point, Zhang Meng looked at Lung Yelio and blinked. Do you understand? Lung Yelio shook her head and said doubtfully, I don't understand. When Zhang Meng heard this, he was speechless. He took a deep breath and said slowly, You're an outsider now. Do you understand? Lung Yelio nodded and said dejectedly, I know. After hearing Lung Yelio's answer, Zhang Meng suddenly clapped his hands. That's it. You just have to think of a way to become not an outsider. Isn't that enough? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelio blinked in confusion and asked tentatively, Can an outsider become not an outsider? After hearing Lung Yelio's question, Zhang Meng secretly smiled and said seriously, That's right. As long as you become a member of our family, you'll be one of us. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelio suddenly came to a realization. She clapped her hands and said happily, I understand. As long as you become my big brother, we'll be family, right? Looking at the inexplicably excited Lung Yelio, Zhang Meng secretly sighed and said slowly, Miss Lung, this is not the only way to become one of us. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelio frowned and asked doubtfully, Is there any other way? Zhang Meng blushed when he heard that. He stammered, Well, that's all for today. Go back and think about how you can become one of us. Let's talk about this in detail tomorrow. Hearing that, Lung Yelio pouted. No, I want to learn it today. Seeing that Lung Yelio was about to act coquettishly, Zhang Meng was helpless and could only push her out of the room. Back in his room, Zhang Meng sat in front of the table. He had been busy for the past few days. He had to think about his plan for the auction house, so he didn't have the time. Taking advantage of this time, Zhang Meng prepared to think about his auction house plan. In the past, Zhang Meng's plan was to build an auction house. Then, he would put the good things he hunted in the auction house to be auctioned. But now, it seemed that he hadn't thought it through. There were still many details that he hadn't thought through clearly. For example, an auction house couldn't only auction top-quality items. There had to be some matching items. If his auction house only auctioned items at sky-high prices and only auctioned 1 or 2 items at each auction, it would be too dangerous. Therefore, there had to be some mid to high quality items. Even mid to high quality items weren't easy to obtain. Take the black feather cloak, for example. Even if Meng Jing found the feather of the Eagle of Nightmares, he still wouldn't be able to get the black feather cloak if no one made it for him. However, as long as Kikyaman was willing to move over, these things would be much simpler. Zhang Ming only needed to bring the feather of the Eagle of Nightmares back. Kikyaman's people would naturally make the black feather cloak from the Eagle of Nightmares. Then, the finished black feather cloak could be auctioned in the auction house. If there weren't people from Kikyaman, then Zhang Ming would be responsible for sending the feather of the Eagle of Nightmares to a certain place and asking someone to make it for him. This kind of thing sounded simple, but it was actually very troublesome to implement. First of all, even if you sent the black feather cloak, the other person might not have the time to make it for you. Also, there was the problem of sending it. If the item sent was very precious, then the safety of the people on the road would be a big problem. If there were too many things, Zhang Ming wouldn't be able to handle it alone. Therefore, sometimes when it came to things like rhyming, Zhang Ming didn't need to appear. If Zhang Ming didn't appear, then the safety would definitely be a lot weaker. If the item was lost, then wouldn't it be a waste of effort? If other people were to send the materials over, then they would have to wait there and wait for the equipment to be made before sending it over. Then it was very likely that the equipment would be lost. Therefore, no matter how good the items outside were, it wouldn't be as convenient as making them in Twin Bull Mountain. In terms of the construction of the auction house, as long as Zhang Liji was there, Zhang Ming believed that his auction house would definitely be made into an impenetrable fortress. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to break in if they wanted to. Most importantly, there was a trap master watching from the side. Even if they found something wrong, they could immediately fix it and upgrade the unsafe traps. In terms of making equipment, if Kikyaman agreed to return to Twin Bull Mountain with him, then when it came to making leather armor, he would have a guarantee and wouldn't have any worries. However, Kikyaman alone definitely wouldn't be able to support an auction house because they only knew how to make leather armor and not other equipment. If he wanted the auction house to have enough craftsmen, then he needed more people to come to Twin Bull Mountain. For example, the Taiyangongmen who were going to compete with Kikyaman were definitely a good choice. Of course, Zhang Ming had never thought of asking the Heaven's Craftsman faction to move to MT Twin Oxen. That was unrealistic. He could only find 1 or 2 equipment crafting experts to move to MT Twin Oxen. There were also alchemy and swordsmithing experts. In short, the more people there were, the more convenient it would be for Zhang Ming. There shouldn't be any problems with Kikyaman now. With Sun Xiao's personality, Zhang Ming believed that as long as he helped her win the competition, it shouldn't be a problem for her to move to Twin Bull Mountain. After all, Sun Xiao had already promised Zhang Ming that as long as she won the competition, she would be able to move to Twin Bull Mountain with Zhang Ming. Since Kikyaman was fine, then it was the Taiyangongmen's problem. However, he wasn't familiar with the Taiyangongmen, so how would he know? Who knew how powerful their equipment was? If he wanted to find an expert craftsman, then he had to find a real expert. This was because the materials that Zhang Ming prepared were definitely the most precious materials in the world. If ordinary people were to make them, it would be a waste. This was also the result that Zhang Ming didn't want to see. Everything was limited, especially some things that were unique. It would be a pity if someone failed to make them. Chapter 346. Zhang Ming was not familiar with the Taiyangongmen, so he naturally had no way of knowing whose skills were superb. Thinking of this, Zhang Ming planned to ask Sun Xiao tomorrow to see if it was possible to bring the Taiyangongmen back. As for whether the Taiyangongmen would take revenge on him if he poached the Taiyangongmen, Zhang Ming had never thought about it. If he was afraid of the Taiyangongmen taking revenge, Zhang Ming would not have done this. The next day, Zhang Ming was woken up by a series of intense knocks on the door before he could get out of bed. Zhang Ming got out of bed and opened the door, only to find that the person knocking on the door was Leng Yelyo. The moment Zhang Ming opened the door, Lung Yelyo could not wait to enter the room. Hey, I thought about it all night yesterday, and I finally figured it out. Zhang Ming didn't expect that the girl was still thinking about this matter until now. What did you think of? Hearing this, Lung Yelyo moved closer to Zhang Ming and whispered, "Do you want me to be your disciple before you teach me this move?" Zhang Ming turned to look at Lung Yelyo in shock and asked doubtfully, "Is this the answer you came up with after thinking about it all night?" Hearing this, Lung Yelyo hurriedly nodded. "Am I right?" After listening to Lung Yelyo for a while, Zhang Ming sighed and said seriously, "Child, you're still young. Don't think about these troublesome things. Let's hurry up and eat." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Lung Yelyo, who was originally full of joy, suddenly looked dejected again. Could it be that I guessed wrong again? Zhang Ming ignored her and pushed the door open to walk out. After thinking for a while, he stepped back and looked at Lung Yelyo. Just as he was about to speak, Lung Yelyo spoke first with a smile. "You agreed to my request?" Zhang Ming smiled bitterly and waved his hand. "Agreed to your head. I want to ask you, where are we going to eat?" After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Lung Yelyo's little mouth suddenly pouted. She muttered as she walked outside, "You only know how to eat. Don't you know how to teach me?" Zhang Ming pretended not to hear Lung Yelyo's complaints. The two of them left the courtyard of the guest room and quickly arrived at the dining room. Before they finished their breakfast, Sun Xiaoer sent someone to look for Zhang Ming and asked him to meet her in the living room. After breakfast, Zhang Ming and Lung Yelyo walked towards the living room. The Sun Xiaoer were sons of the Sun Xiao Xiao, were Xiaoer, were Lung were Xiaoers paced back and forth, and when Sun Xiaoer saw Zhang Ming enter, she stopped and said with a smile, "I'll start making the equipment for this competition today. I wonder if Prince Zhang has any requirements for this equipment?" After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Zhang Ming shook his head. "It's like Master Sun, just make it. I don't have any requirements." At this point, Zhang Ming pondered for a while before continuing. "Sect Master Sun, you can make whatever equipment you want for the competition, but remember one thing. During the competition, you must let me sit at a place where I can see the equipment." After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Sun Xiaoer nodded. "No problem. Both of us will be present during the competition. It won't be a problem even if you're there." Hearing this, Zhang Ming nodded. "Then I have no problem with that." Sun Xiaoer pondered for a moment before turning to look at Lung Yelyo. She said softly, "This is Prince Zhang's first time in South County. There are still a few days before the competition. Take advantage of this gap and bring Prince Zhang around South County for a few days." When Lung Yelyo heard this, she was overjoyed and hurriedly nodded. Okay. Originally, Lung Yelyo stayed here every day to make equipment. She had long been tired of doing such a boring job. Now that she heard that Sun Xiao had allowed her to play, Lung Yelyo was overjoyed. Before Zhang Ming could say anything, Lung Yelyo impatiently pulled Zhang Ming's hand and ran out of the door. "Mother, we're leaving." Looking at her daughter and Zhang Ming's backs, and then at their hands, Sun Xiaoer was about to stop them when her heart skipped a beat. Zhang Ming and Lung Yelyo walked out of Kikyaman's gate and headed towards South County City. After arriving at South County City, it didn't take long for Zhang Ming to realize something. Originally, Sun Xiaoer had asked Lung Yelyo to accompany her to play. However, it wasn't playing with her. It was clearly her who was accompanying Lung Yelyo to go shopping. The two of them first came to a silk shop. Lung Yelyo first compared each batch of cloth on her body and asked Zhang Ming to give her all kinds of suggestions. Seeing that this girl was extremely excited about a piece of blue cloth, but did not say that she wanted to buy it, Zhang Ming had no choice but to buy this piece of cloth for her. It was not easy for them to leave the silk shop. In the blink of an eye, Lung Yelyo rushed into a rouge and powder shop. After entering the shop, all kinds of fragrances made Zhang Ming feel a little sleepy. In a daze, he could only see Lung Yelyo shuttling back and forth in all kinds of powder like a butterfly. In a daze, Zhang Ming only remembered that he had spent a lot of money and bought a lot of things. It was not easy for them to leave the rouge and powder shop and smell the fresh air. Zhang Ming had just felt a little awake when he suddenly realized that Lung Yelyo had already looked at a jewelry shop next to him. Seeing that Lung Yelyo had already rushed toward the jewelry shop, Zhang Ming did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly reached out to grab Lung Yelyo and said with a wry smile, "Where are you going?" Hearing Zhang Ming's question, Lung Yelyo suddenly turned his head and pointed at the jewelry store as he said anxiously, "Jean de go look. I heard that the jewelry in that jewelry shop is very beautiful. I wanted to go in the past, but my mother won't let me go. It's not easy for my mother to let me go today. Let's go in and take a look." After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Ming shook his head and pointed to the sky. "Miss, you have to look carefully. It's already noon. Shouldn't we eat first before going to that jewelry shop?" Hearing this, Lung Yelyo quickly shook her head. "I'm not hungry. Let's go to that jewelry shop first and then eat, okay?" Zhang Ming shook his head. "No." Seeing this, Lung Yelyo quickly whispered, "It'll be soon. Let's go in and take a look. We'll be out soon. It won't be too late to eat then." Seeing Lung Yelyo lying to his face, Zhang Ming could only laugh bitterly in his heart. A rouge and powder shop and a silk shop had let them shop for the whole morning. If this was fast, Zhang Ming really did not know what was slow. Seeing that Lung Yelyo was about to say something else, Zhang Ming reached out and pulled her towards a nearby hotel. Lung Yelyo's face was filled with reluctance as she struggled with all her might. Unfortunately, no matter how hard she struggled, it was useless. She could only obediently follow Zhang Ming. The two of them pulled and entered the restaurant. Zhang Ming looked around, but Lung Yelyo, who was behind him, suddenly smiled and ran in front of him. Seeing this, Zhang Ming could not help but be stunned. Chapter 347. Lung Yelyo walked towards the innermost table. There were two guests at this table. One was a girl in her 20s dressed in light green, and the other was a slightly younger man dressed in gray. Lung Yelyo walked out from behind Zhang Ming and headed straight for this table. Before she reached the table, she had already heard her shout, "Second senior sister, what a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet you here." When the green-robed girl heard Lung Yelyo's shout, her expression changed, and she hurriedly stood up to welcome her. "Little junior sister, you're here too." Lung Yelyo quickly stepped forward and held the green-robed girl's hand as she said with a smile, "Second senior sister, what are you doing in the city today?" The green-robed girl smiled. "Nothing much. What about you, little junior sister? What are you doing in the city?" Hearing the green-robed girl's question, Lung Yelyo finally remembered Zhang Ming. She hurriedly turned around and pulled Zhang Ming over with a smile. "I'm here today on my mother's orders to accompany Prince Zhang to play." At this point, Lung Yelyo lowered her voice and said proudly, "Second senior sister, it's not just today. There's still a few more days where I can accompany Prince Zhang to play in the city." After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, the green-robed girl smiled and said, "This time you must be happy. You can play to your heart's content." Hearing this, Lung Yelyo nodded her head vigorously, and after Lung Yelyo responded, she suddenly saw the man sitting opposite the green-robed girl and asked curiously, "Second senior sister, who is he? Could it be your he?" Hearing this, the green-robed girl blushed and pointed at the gray-robed youth. "He's my younger brother." As she spoke, the green-robed girl turned her head to look at Zhang Ming and smiled. "My name is Hong Yu. I'm little Lu's second senior sister. This is my younger brother, and Dazhai. May I know this young master's name?" As soon as the green-robed girl finished speaking, before Zhang Ming could reply, Lung Yelyo had already spoken first. "Second senior sister, his name is Zhang Ming." While they were talking, Lung Yelyo and Zhang Ming also sat down at this table. When the waiter came over, Lung Yelyo casually ordered a few more dishes. Then, they started chatting again. While they were talking, Lung Yelyo turned his head and glanced at Dazhai. Then, he was stunned and frowned. Everyone chatted for a while more before Hong Yu turned to look at Lung Yelyo. "Xiao Lu, you and Prince Zhang can eat first. We've finished eating, so we'll be leaving first." When Lung Yelyo heard this, he hurriedly said, "All right, you guys can leave first." While they were talking, An Hong Yu and In Jiahui got up and left. When In Hong Yu and In Jiahui's figures disappeared from the door, Zhang Ming turned to look at Lung Yelyo and asked in confusion, "Why do you look so unhappy when you see In Jiahui? Is there something wrong with him?" Hearing the name In Jiahui, Lung Yelyo suddenly threw the chopsticks in his hand onto the table and anger surfaced on his face. "Jean de Gue, do you know who that In Jiahui is?" Hearing Lung Yelyo's question, Zhang Ming replied curiously, "In Jiahui, isn't he your second senior sister's younger brother? Is there a problem?" Hearing this, Lung Yelyo sneered. Although In Jiahui is second senior sister's younger brother, he has another identity that you don't know about. Zhang Ming asked, "What identity?" Lung Yelyo sneered, "In Jiahui is from the Taiyang Gongmen." Hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Ming was stunned for a moment before asking, "Really? How do you know that In Jiahui is from the Taiyang Gongmen?" Hearing Zhang Ming's question, Lung Yelyo picked up his sleeve and pointed to a place. The disciples of the Taiyang Gongmen all have the word work at the bottom of their sleeves. Zhang Ming said, "You saw this word on his sleeve just now, so you were sure that he was from the Taiyang Gongmen, right?" Lung Yelyo nodded, like the color and style of his clothes, and that word work, this is enough to prove that second senior sister's younger brother, In Jiahui, is definitely from the Taiyang Gongmen. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Ming looked at Lung Yelyo strangely and asked, "It's really strange that you can observe so carefully." Hearing Zhang Ming's question, Lung Yelyo turned to look at Zhang Ming. "What's so strange about that? I'm not stupid. How could I not see that word?" Looking at Lung Yelyo's bright eyes, Zhang Ming suddenly had a feeling that this girl was definitely not stupid. Could it be that what he said last night was just this girl teasing him? Lung Yelyo ignored Zhang Ming's thoughts and said with a frown, "And Jiahui is from the Taiyang Gongmen. Then, why does second senior sister want to meet him?" Hearing this, Zhang Ming couldn't help but laugh. "They are siblings. Why can't they meet?" Lung Yelyo shook her head. "It's not that they can't meet. Don't you think it's strange?" Zhang Ming shook his head. "What's strange about it? I really don't think it's strange for the siblings to meet." Lung Yelyo said, "Second senior sister has been in Kikyaman for 3 or 4 years. Why don't we know that she has a Taiyang Gongmen brother?" Zhang Ming smiled. "Maybe your second senior sister doesn't want to talk about it. She's afraid of causing you to misunderstand." At this point, Zhang Ming paused for a moment before continuing, "Look, you see. Look, now that you've found out, you've misunderstood," Wang Yao said. After hearing Zhang Ming's words, Lung Yelyo shook her head again. "No, if they met at any other time, it wouldn't be suspicious." At this point, Lung Yelyo turned to look at Zhang Ming and said with some doubt, "It's the Taiyang Gongmen's competition. Now is the time for the Taiyang Gongmen to compete with Kikyaman. Why do they have to wait until now to meet?" After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Zhang Ming was stunned for a moment. Then he waved his hand. "They're siblings. I don't think it's strange for them to meet." Lung Yelyo shook his head again. "That's not right. Although second senior sister doesn't like to talk much, we get along very well. Every time we meet, we talk for a long time. But this time, as you can see, he left within Jiahui after a few words were exchanged. In order to prepare for this competition, Kikyaman has stopped making equipment for the outside world. Logically speaking, everyone shouldn't be that busy. However, second senior sister just said that she had something urgent to attend to and had to leave. This is even more strange. Speaking of this, Lung Yelyo's tone paused for a moment. He frowned and thought for a moment before speaking again. "I think the reason why second senior sister left so quickly was that she didn't want us to have any more contact with Jiahui. She would have chosen to leave as soon as possible." Jean de Gue, do you think I'm right? After listening to Lung Yelyo's analysis, Zhang Ming felt a little embarrassed. He was now completely sure that yesterday's matter was definitely this girl teasing him. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.